It's for life. And it's a lifelong commitment. You know, dogs are with us, and some of them are needy and some of them are more independent. If you give your dogs lots of love, you exercise them well, you feed them well, you're able to leave them for, you know, short periods of time. But if you are at work for 8-10 hours a day, it's just too long to leave a dog for. So, you know, really keep that in mind, that, you know, is that dog going to work for you in your life? Saying that, you know, dogs bring you so much. They're going to make you live longer. They're going to, you know, they're so good for you sort of health-wise. They're going to take you out for a walk every day. They're going to take you out in nature.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Very, very good afternoon to you. It's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live, all the very latest news, debate and analysis all the way through until 6 p.m. And here's what's coming up on today's show. The UK borrowed a whopping £20.2 billion in September, topped only by the COVID lockdown September of 2020, as national debt climbs towards an astonishing £3 trillion. Will Labour's high tax, high spend make Britain go bust? A shocking new report has mapped what proportion of social housing in Britain is occupied by immigrants. Across London, it's an incredible 47.6%, but in some boroughs, it's as high as 73%. Is it time to limit access to social housing for immigrants and put British tenants first? And today, MPs will vote on whether to publish crime data by the offender's country of origin. Will they vote for truth and transparency, which could show that Afghans are 22 times more likely to sex offend, or will they vote for a cover-up? And the number of young people not in education, employment or training is on track to hit 1 million for the first time in over a decade. Are youngsters lazy or, faced with soaring immigration, joblessness and increased housing prices, are they simply giving up? And food inflation has soared to a staggering 40% since COVID, with bills rocketing 5.4% in the past quarter alone. So why are farmers seeing their profits tumble? On today's show, I'll be joined by a desperate farmer who claims the big supermarkets are screwing us to the floor. And that's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have your company. Bedlam at the heart of the rape gang inquiry. This should be and is one of the most important inquiries in all of British political history, to deal with one of the biggest scandals in British political history. And yet the entire thing seems like a charade, a farce. It's falling apart. 3 people now have walked away from this. It's simply become too toxic. 2 survivors convinced their voices aren't being heard. And today, somebody who was a potential chair for the inquiry has walked away fearing the media backlash. What on earth is going on with this? It should be cherished. It should be important. And instead, it seems to be falling apart around our ears and denying survivors the justice they so desperately deserve. Get in touch, gbnews.com/your say is the way to do so. But now it's your headlines, and here's Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you very much. The top stories. US President Donald Trump has issued a warning to Hamas on his Truth Social account. He says if Hamas don't do the right thing, their end will be fast, furious and brutal. Donald Trump's 20-point ceasefire plan calls for Gaza to disarm and for steps towards a Palestinian state, demands both sides have yet to fully accept. It comes as US Vice President J.D. Vance arrived in Israel as Washington pushes to stabilise the fragile Gaza ceasefire. His visit follows talks between Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner as Hamas leaders meet mediators in Cairo. Mr. Vance is expected to visit military command centres overseeing Gaza's stabilisation efforts amid renewed clashes and disputes over aid and hostage returns. Elsewhere, Annie Hudson, the frontrunner to chair the government's national grooming gangs inquiry, has quit, deepening the crisis around the already troubled investigation. Sources say she withdrew before interviews took place, telling officials she was no longer interested following recent media coverage. Her exit comes after 3 survivors on the victims panel have now resigned, accusing the Home Office of delays, secrecy and losing their trust. Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp says the inquiry has descended into chaos and that survivors have no faith in the process.
When calls for a national inquiry became public in January, the Prime Minister smeared campaigners as jumping on a far-right bandwagon. Comments like that are a disgrace and are what led to this scandal being covered up in the first place. Months later, just 2 days before facing a vote in Parliament, the government finally agreed to the inquiry. But it's clear the government never wanted this inquiry, they were forced into it. Perhaps that is why, months later, the government has said nothing substantive publicly and their inquiry is descending into chaos.
But Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips insists the government remains committed to uncovering the truth.
Baroness Casey said to this House in the Home Affairs Select Committee she did not want a traditional judicial-led inquiry. She was explicit. And if anyone in this House can find me an institution that didn't fail these girls over the years, including our courts, who took the children away from the grooming gang victims, who criminalised some of them, there is no institution in our country that hasn't failed.
In other news, the ghostwriter of Virginia Giuffre's memoir Nobody's Girl has called on Prince Andrew to tell US police everything he knows about Jeffrey Epstein's abuse. Amy Wallace says the Duke of York needs to speak about his own moral compass, claiming his silence continues to hurt victims. Lawyer Gloria Allred, who represents several of Epstein victims, echoed the call, urging Andrew to cooperate with investigators about what he may have witnessed at Epstein's Manhattan home. Prince Andrew continues to deny all wrongdoing. Andrew denies any wrongdoing, but senior Tory Robert Jenrick claims the public are sick of him.
He's disgraced himself, he's embarrassed the royal family time and again. He should just go and lead a quiet life now, away from the public gaze. He certainly shouldn't be drawing on the taxpayer in any way. No more subsidies for luxury homes for him. Enough is enough.
Boris Johnson has told the COVID inquiry we probably did go too far with lockdown rules, particularly for children. Mr Johnson told the inquiry closing schools during the COVID pandemic was a nightmare idea, but insists he was left with no choice. The former Prime Minister, who launched the inquiry himself in 2022, denied there'd been a failure to plan, contradicting evidence from his former Education Secretary, Sir Gavin Williamson. Mr Johnson said he hoped schools would stay open, but the pace of the pandemic made closures unavoidable. It's his second appearance at the inquiry, where he previously apologised for the pain and loss caused by COVID. The Conservatives say more than 2,000 prisoners convicted of rape, stalking and grooming could be freed early under the government's new sentencing bill. They've tabled an amendment to block what they call an insult to victims, warning dangerous offenders should serve their full terms. But ministers have hit back, accusing the Tories of hypocrisy, pointing out that thousands of serious criminals were also released early when they were in power. The government insists the new bill is designed to ease overcrowding while keeping the public safe. And Israeli football club Maccabi Tel Aviv says it will refuse any tickets for next month's Europa League match at Aston Villa over safety concerns for its supporters. It follows a decision by Birmingham's Safety Advisory Group to ban Maccabi fans from attending, a move the government later urged to be overturned. But the club says a toxic atmosphere and hate-filled falsehoods have left fans fearing for their safety. The government says it's deeply saddened by the situation, calling it completely unacceptable that the match has been used to stir up violence and fear. Those are the latest headlines for now. More in half an hour.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GBNews financial report.
Here's a snapshot of the markets. The pound buying you $1.3389, €1.1518. Price of gold, £3,185.75 per ounce. The FTSE 100's at 9,433 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GBNews financial report.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now, breaking news this past hour, and a third survivor has quit the government's grooming gangs inquiry, warning it's become a stage-managed and disconnected from victims. The Rotherham survivor told GB News she'd lost faith in the process altogether, saying survivors feel silence about the truth about grooming gangs and it is still being buried. Well, let's speak now to GB News' national reporter Charlie Peters. Charlie, this inquiry should be one of the jewels in the crown of British political thought. It should be cherished. It should get the full force, the full finance, the full support of the entire state, the political movement. It seems to be descending into absolute chaos, Charlie Peters.
The government has said that they think this inquiry is going to be fully resourced and have full powers under the Inquiries Act of 2005. It will be a statutory inquiry. But we are obviously hearing many reports about those invited to engage with a survivor panel to inform the government's decisions on chair, but also on the terms of reference. Many of them are clearly losing support and faith in the process, with a third survivor quitting that panel today. Elizabeth Harper from Rotherham, she said, like Fiona Goddard and Ellie Reynolds said last night, that she had concerns about the terms of reference and also stage management. Now, the government insists on the terms of reference that this will absolutely be an inquiry, a focused inquiry into grooming gangs. And Home Office sources have told GB News today that they are trying to narrow the focus of the inquiry. However, what we've revealed this afternoon is that in correspondence last month between survivors on the panel and NWG, which is the charity managing that panel on behalf of the Home Office, the victims were asked if the probe should take a broader approach. They were asked under a section called Questions for Reflection ahead of a panel meeting, should the inquiry have an explicit focus on grooming gangs or group-based child sexual exploitation and abuse, or should it take a broader approach? Now, this, as you can understand, Martin, has led to quite a lot of concern within the survivor panel and has been part of the reason why 3 members have now quit, because they were feeling as though questions were being asked and the direction was being offered, which would shift the conversation away from that laser focus on grooming gangs. One survivor telling me that we've already had an ICSA investigation into all forms of child abuse. What we need now is a really specific focus on these abuse networks. So I think that correspondence coming out is going to cause quite a reaction, because Jess Phillips, in a letter to the Home Affairs Select Committee last night, said it was totally untrue to refer to the widening of the terms of reference or anything about the expansion of the scope of the inquiry. But in this correspondence, we're seeing the panel of survivors being asked if they want a broader inquiry. Now, in defence of the Safeguarding Minister and the government, they can very easily point out to the fact that this panel is being organised by a charity, not by the Home Office. But for survivors in that panel, they can very easily see questions being asked. That does seem to be shifting the focus away from this issue. Should also say that I have heard from many survivors also engaging with this process who do want some wider investigation. They do want also additional layers to be focused, such as perhaps the family members of these abuse gangs, who are also often targeted by those perpetrators. They fear that perhaps that could be lost if it is specifically on grooming gangs. So there is lots of discussion going on at the moment, Martin, but it's clear that amid all that discussion, some survivors are losing faith in the process, although the Home Office is being very keen to point out that they are laser focused. They're going to have the resources, they're going to have the powers for this inquiry. But we also revealed this morning, Martin, that one of the potential chairs, Annie Hudson, had removed herself from the process. So as it stands, as we're approaching this final stage, as the Safeguarding Minister described it last month, only one person's been up for interview, a former police officer.
Maybe the job is simply too big. Maybe there's just simply too much pressure on the person who has to be in charge. As Charlie Peters, and that is why a lot of people, yourself included, have been saying all along, perhaps it should go to an outsider, a foreign expert who's politically neutral, who can just look at this forensically without having any of the incumbent politics. Charlie Peters, this just rumbles on and on. Thank you very much, as ever, for bringing us up to speed, my friend. And I'm joined in the studio by GB News' political editor, Christopher Hope. Chris, welcome to Westminster. It's beautiful to see you, as ever. The political scandal here seems to be worsening. The Labour Party might put a brave face on, but from the outside, this looks like total calamity.
Yeah, it looks like, frankly, crisis. But I did ask the government that today, and they said, no, it's not a crisis. This is one of the greatest scandals in our country's history. They get that. We're working with victims across the country. They get that. They want to get justice for the victims. They get that. But they'd say that the fact that one of the two individuals who could be chairing this inquiry is disappearing and leaving or withdrawing from the process, that's not a crisis. And now we have 3 victims. A third one has gone since we last quizzed the governor about this. That apparently is the first 2 going wasn't a crisis. It does seem extremely chaotic. At the heart of this, you've got young women now much older, but at the time with children.
So what does it take for them to accept this as the crisis?
I don't know.
3 survivors resigning and nobody seemingly wants the top job.
I don't know. In our meeting, they're asked about whether the scope of the inquiry will be widened to take it away from predominantly Pakistani heritage men who are involved. The government says no. They recognise that a disproportionate number of Asian men have been responsible for the grooming gang scandal. So they are talking the talk, but they're not walking the walk. I mean, we are nowhere near. We have no timeline on when it might start work. We have only a single chair left who might go for it. It may be time to go back to the drawing board and start again. But it's got to be right. They do say, by the way, that before the Alexis J inquiry was set up, the ICSA report, which Charlie Peters talked about, 3 chairs that time withdrew from the process. So
but the front page of all the newspapers are accusing the Labour Party of sabotaging this, of not wanting it to go ahead, because what it might unveil will be too damaging for the Labour Party. Is there any truth in that?
That is denied fully by the government, but there is suggestions that some people within the party are trying to widen the scope of it to take it away from looking at predominantly Asian heritage men who are part of this against young white girls. That's where the criticism comes in. OK, so politically, are the knives being sharpened for Prince Andrew? Well, they are literally being sharpened. In my hand here is the early day motion, a government motion, a parliamentary motion put down into the conduct of Prince Andrew. Highly rare to have anything about the royal family. It says this country calls on the government to take legislative steps, a law, to remove the dukedom granted to Prince Andrew. So far, 17 MPs have signed it from the Green Party, Lib Dems and the SNP, but not from the 2 main parties. We'll wait and see where that goes. And also, it's worth noting that we have a Tory frontbencher, Robert Jenrick, calling today for Prince Andrew to leave his house, Royal Lodge. We found out overnight he pays a peppercorn rent there, literally a peppercorn, and he should go a 30-room mansion. Is that required for him? It could be better put to the use for the Crown Estate. Why is it still there? Pressure is growing. Not normal in politics. When politics meets the royal family, it's never easy.
Thank you, Chris Hope. Superb update, as ever, for joining us here in the studio. Thank you. Now, in response to the previous story, the Home Office said the abuse of children by grooming gangs is one of the most horrific crimes imaginable. Any suggestion that this inquiry is being watered down is completely wrong. We are committed to delivering a robust, thorough inquiry that will get to the truth and provide the answers that survivors have so long campaigned for. We are working urgently to appoint the best chair to take forward this work and deliver justice, putting victims and survivors at the heart of the process. And it goes on. We are grateful to all those who have shared their insights with us. We share the concerns around unhelpful speculation while this process is live, which is why we will not be providing a running commentary. Now, here is a huge question. Is Britain going bust? Well, the latest figures from the Office for National Statistics out today reveal that government borrowing exceeded £20 billion in September. Now, this is the second highest September on record, superseded only by the COVID lockdown September of 2020. Now, this comes as the UK's national debt is set to break an astonishing £3 trillion barrier within the next year. Well, should we all be afraid? Should we all be very afraid? Let's now speak with the political commentator and the former head of labour market analysis at the ONS, Jamie Jenkins. Jamie, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have your company again. You're an expert at stats and you make it digestible, even for dunces like me. So let's start at the beginning. Borrowing is growing through the roof. The cost of servicing that is going through the roof. And the government doesn't seem to have much in the way of cost savings. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, good afternoon, Martin. So what we've got is, it wasn't that long ago when Rachel Reeves was talking about like 22 billion being a black hole. So we've got this 1 month now where we've hit over 20 billion of borrowing. And if we take the first 6 months of the year, we've actually hit a total of 100 billion pounds. You know, that's a staggering amount, 100 billion pounds when you take the government's financial year from April to the September period. So that's 7 billion above forecasts, and it's actually 11 billion higher than last year. And the forecast has already been uprated based on what we had last year. So the government borrowing is through the roof. But a critical part of what's driving this up, Martin, is when you actually look at inflation. So this is one of the areas where we've got much higher inflation in the UK than we have in some of our European counterparts. And some of the government policies, the national insurance hike, etc., is part of that. And there's three key parts as to why the borrowing figures are impacted by the government's policies on inflation. So the first one is the debt interest itself. So we borrowed nearly 10 billion pounds of that 20. So nearly half of the money we've borrowed was to go to pay the interest on the accumulated debt that we've got overall. But that's 2.7 billion higher than what it would be if inflation was a bit lower than what it should be. Then we've also got 2.6 billion increase in departmental spending. So that's all the government, different departments. And that's pretty much increases in wages where the unions have done the deals with the Labour Party. And the other one as well is that inflation's linked to other things like benefits and pensions. So with inflation being a bit higher, we've had to borrow another £2 billion for that. So the government's policies on inflation are pushing up the borrowing figures, and that's where we're hitting this astronomical figure of 3 trillion in the next 12 months.
So, Jamie, when you add all of that together, astronomical debt, astronomical spending, little in the way of revenues coming in, certainly revenues that can't eradicate things like soaring public sector wages, there's only one tool left in the box, and that's taxes. It's a foreboding picture moving towards November the 26th, Jamie.
Well, there's two ways of doing the figures here. So you either increase taxes or you cut spending. And we have seen taxes in the latest figures go up, but the government spending, some of the things I've talked about and other things have gone up even more, which is why we're borrowing more money. So the government has got two options. Yeah, increase taxes, but that then stifles economic growth, or cut taxes. But then you also need a thing to go cutting spending as well. So maybe they should start with the cutting spending. And you started, I suppose, Martin, with is Britain bankrupt? Now, if you was running a business, imagine a scenario where the total debt of your business is equivalent to your annual turnover, and then you're borrowing money from the bank to pay the interest of what you owe the bank. Most banks would actually call you bankrupt. So I think pretty much the UK is heading in that direction if the government can't get control of the public finances.
Jamie Jenkins, Margaret Thatcher famously said, the thing about socialism is that in the end it always runs out of other people's money. Are we heading down that dark path?
Pretty much that's where we're heading, Martin. You can't. What you want to do is you look at your total debt. You want to look at it in relation to the size of the economy, and it's getting up towards 100% now in terms of the total debt in relation to the size of the economy. This is not levels we've seen kind of in normal peacetime. It crept up in the pandemic. It's been that high in wars in the past. So to be in these unprecedented times in peacetime is concerning. And the one way of getting that down, Martin, is to grow the economy. And I'm not seeing anything on the table from the current government that's going to grow that economy. And the economic forecasts are looking pretty dire as well.
Well, Jamie Jenkins, we've got about 35 days to go until November the 26th. Can the mother of all rabbits be pulled out of the hat? Jamie Jenkins, thank you as ever for joining us on the show today. Superb. Thank you very much, my friend. And loads more still to come between now and 4 p.m, including the controversial president-elect of the Oxford Union, who celebrated the death of Charlie Kirk. Well, he's been ousted following finally a no-confidence vote that he called himself. However, he claims the result is invalid. Of course he does, and insists he's still the perfect president-elect. You're with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m, only on GB News.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience, because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Time is 3:26 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, the controversial Oxford Union president-elect, of course, that's George Arabonye, well, he's been ousted after losing a no-confidence vote that he called himself. The 20-year-old sparked outrage, of course, after his apparent celebration of Charlie Kirk's fatal shooting, that assassination last month. Now, let's listen to him debating Charlie Kirk at the Oxford Union back in May.
With all due respect, have you been to London the last 10 years? Men can do whatever they want.
I live in London.
Are they happier? Men can dress how they want. Men can act how they want. And go to any club. Has it worked?
Yeah, but also we've had austerity. There are other factors outside of simply just.
Do you see what you're doing,
cultural
respectfully? You're scrambling for an excuse to get away from the truth that's right in front of you. I mean, maybe men should get married and have children.
And there's George in his Ugg boots and his jogging bottoms. Let's get the thoughts now of the former president of the Oxford Union, James Price. James, welcome to the show. Of course, I understand you resigned over this incredible affair, and it trundles on. This clown has lost the no-confidence vote comprehensively, yet he's still insisting he's the president-elect.
Yeah, hello, my friend. It's good to be back with you. It's a pretty unedifying set of scandals, this, isn't it? I think the real problem here is the Oxford Union is always noteworthy. Not only have little minnows like me run the place, but your likes of Boris Johnson and Michael Gove, and going back, Ted Heath and Lord Salisbury and Harold Macmillan and Michael Heseltine and all those sorts of people as well. So perhaps we've got an awful lot to be blamed for in the state of the country in general. But whereas the scandals that beset all of those people are bugs, I think the scandals now are a feature. But what do I mean by that? I think that the people that are now getting involved, and Mr. Arabonye is the perfect example of this, are getting involved in this wonderful old unique British institution that is known the world round. It's the last bastion of free speech and a place to teach debating rather than violence. They get involved with it so they can trash the place, so they can, quote, decolonize it. And Mr. Arabonye himself, in some leaked text messages, say, oh, I got involved in it because I hate the place. And I think that is why this is so newsworthy, because it's as endemic of what's happening in institutions right across the country. We're getting people like this who think it's funny or think it's politically important to destroy the institutions that people have spent many generations building up.
The problem is, of course, he's lost his vote by a crushing landslide, and yet he's seemingly refusing to even listen to democracy. I mean, what happens next? I mean, it just seems like from the outside, it seems like an absolute clown world.
Yeah, well, I think when I was president, but when I started, I was a young girl with a dream, and people watching the screen can see what it did to me. It is a very odd little institution, and it does prepare people well, I think, for the kind of Machiavellian nature of Westminster politics, which is maybe why it's such, historically been such a pipeline into Westminster and Whitehall. The exact goings on right now is there is a window by which people can set up these things called tribunals. It's almost like a kind of workplace tribunal or like a court inside the union itself to critique or criticize or challenge the results of this. And you tend to find ex-presidents and ex-returning officers from decades ago who give up their time and go back to Oxford and sit in judgment on this. So the scandal has some way to go yet.
And yet there's a bigger threat on the horizon potentially, of course, and that is the defunding of the Oxford Union. It relies a lot on charitable donations, does it not? And people have been saying not only that, the money could be choked off, but speakers themselves will refuse to appear so long as this individual has anything to do with the union. Ted Cruz, speakers like that simply won't platform themselves. And the entire thing, surely beyond this individual, brings enormous shame upon the Oxford Union.
Yeah, well, that's why I resigned from the charity that owned the union's buildings. I thought it would be a quieter affair, and it got seen 6.5 million times on Twitter, which was a bit wild. And I think that what's needed is to give the place a bit of a shunt into the new decade, new century, new millennium. You make of it as you will. I would never like to let a good crisis go to waste, however. What I think this has shown is how uniquely newsworthy the Oxford Union still can be, but perhaps more how important it is to have these institutions that care about debating. And that's at the heart of this. I think why people were so angry with this little moron in the first place was because, as you just showed there, a few months before Charlie Kirk was assassinated for that heinous crime of debating in good faith against your political opponents, he debated against this guy. And by the way, Kirk wiped the floor with him, it should be said. And he was gracious enough not to bother clapping when Kirk walked in, to wander off and yawn expressively when he lost the debate against Kirk. But I think this shows how important it is that we should be able to debate against people. And the Oxford Union should be an example of where we can debate and disagree with each other well. And I think that's why there's been such a reaction to this, and why we need to have more debate. Because as Churchill said, if you don't have jaw, you end up with war.
Yeah, James Price, though, am I correct in assuming that this candidate was actually a suboptimal candidate in terms of the grades he achieved anyway? Does he even deserve a place at Oxford University in the first place? I hear he was turned down by the universities. Was he shoehorned in as a diversity hire in the first place anyway? And that's what ended up causing this problem.
I don't know about any of the reasons why he was given a place, but he himself put on his LinkedIn page, into the social media profile for your kind of professional view of the world, that he only received an A, B, and a B at his A levels, which is not what you would normally expect to be able to be required to get into Oxford. And so I do think what we're seeing there is some of our institutions are taking things other than excellence and other than merit when they are looking at who they want to hire, the kind of causes they want to champion. And that's not unique to Oxford. It's not unique to anything in Britain. Lots of institutions are doing this, and you see it with the fact that the National Trust goes on and on about slavery. Everything's got to be about colonialism and empire and all the rest of it, rather than the pursuit of knowledge, the pursuit of excellence, the pursuit of merit. And I think when our institutions have done that, we've ruled the world and run the world, and all sorts of wonderful contributions to humanity have flowed from that. And when we take our eye off those sort of objective standards and through to more subjective things, as perhaps has happened in universities in recent years, we see that we get someone with Ugg boots sitting there yawning and not caring about upholding that institution. And what is it they said? That tradition is not the worshipping of ashes, it's the preservation of the fire. And that's what we should focus on.
Beautiful stuff. And maybe it's the final embers burning out on the sad tale of George Wokarati. Thank you very much for joining us on the show.
Definitely, yeah.
Thanks, mate. Always a pleasure. James Price, superb guest as ever. Now, George Aberonier has said this in response. 2 centuries later, the same people who claim to believe in the union are now acting in stark opposition to the union's founding principles by supporting a campaign of harassment, censorship and abuse. We will not be silenced. Lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including farmers hitting back at claims they're responsible for food inflation. But if it's not them, then who is to blame? But first, here's your latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you. The top stories. US President Donald Trump has issued a warning to Hamas on his Truth Social account. He says if Hamas don't do the right thing, their end will be fast, furious and brutal. Donald Trump's 20-point ceasefire plan calls for Hamas to disarm and for steps towards a Palestinian state, demands both sides have yet to fully accept. Annie Hudson, once tipped to lead the national grooming gangs inquiry, has quit before interviews even took place, deepening the crisis around the probe. Her exit follows the resignation of 3 abuse survivors from the victims panel who say trust in the process has collapsed. The ghostwriter of Virginia Giuffre's new memoir says Prince Andrew should finally speak to US authorities about Jeffrey Epstein's abuse. He's being urged to tell police everything he knows. Andrew denies any wrongdoing. Boris Johnson is giving evidence at the COVID inquiry about the effect of the pandemic on young people. He says school closures were a nightmare idea, but has said he was left with no choice. Those are the headlines for now. More at the top of the hour.
Take the GB News family with you on any device. As long as you have an internet connection, tune into GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond.
Hello again, I'm here with your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Through the rest of today, yes, there will be some showery rain still, but a lot of this is actually going to ease as we head through the evening and overnight. I do actually want to highlight an area of low pressure currently out in the Atlantic. That's heading our way. It's going to bring some very wet and windy weather to southern parts later tomorrow and into Thursday. But before all that, yes, still some showery bursts through the rest of today, but into the evening and overnight, they're easing. Lots of places turning largely dry, lots of clear skies around, and with those clear skies then temperatures are going to drop just a little bit lower than they have done through some recent nights. So a bit of a fresh start for some of us. Rural spots getting close to freezing, and we could see some pockets of mist and fog first thing as well. It is then going to be a generally bright, albeit fresh start to the day for many of us tomorrow. Across some southern parts of England, largely dry, just 1 or 2 showers perhaps towards coastal parts of Cornwall, and similar some coastal showers of parts of Wales. Across Northern Ireland, it's mostly dry towards the east, a few showers starting to push in from the west, and also a bit of a west-east split across much of Scotland too. Cloudy, a bit wetter towards the west, some stronger winds here. Meanwhile, in the east and down the eastern side of northern England too, lots of fine bright weather to start the day once any mist and fog patches burn away. Through the day itself, still a few showery bursts across northern western parts, but otherwise most places having a lot of fine weather, probably the driest day of the week for many places, albeit later on we are going to see cloud building from the southwest with that rain arriving as well. With a bit more sunshine and generally light winds for many, it won't feel too bad. Relatively warm with temperatures peaking in the mid-teens, but then things turn cloudy, wet and windy across southern parts as that system that I highlighted at the start pushes its way in. Now we are going to see more very wet and windy weather to come, particularly across southern and eastern parts as we go through Thursday, and then a showery day on Friday before things turn drier but colder by Saturday.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, this is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. The M74 southbound has issues between junctions 1 and 1A due to debris. Plan for extra travel time. The M48 limits heavy goods vehicles to 7.5 tonnes until further notice. In Derbyshire, the A50 eastbound faces lane closures between junctions with the A514 and the A6 due to a broken down vehicle. The M5 northbound entry slip at junction 20 in North Somerset is restricted because of animals on the road. And on the trains, Cross Country reports disruption between Cambridge and Audley End, while the Gatwick Express is suspended. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Welcome back. Time is 3:38 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, farmers have hit back at claims that they are responsible for food inflation. Rather, they say it is the so-called supermarket cartel who have been accused of raising food prices at above inflation rate. And not only that, farmers are furious. So their bottom line is being squeezed by the big supermarkets who are simply screwing them to the floor. Let's now speak with Kurt Morton from Farmers to Action. Kurt, welcome to the show. Food inflation figures are mind-blowing at the moment. The latest edition of which landed last night. 40% since COVID. 40% the price of your average basket of groceries, and they've gone up by 5.4% in the past quarter alone. A lot of people thinking because of that, farmers must be getting rich off the fat of the land, enjoying the spoils of all of this. But Kurt Morton, you're about to tell me that's completely untrue.
Well, good afternoon, Martin. Thank you very much for having me on the show. Yeah, your viewers will be able to tell, you know, food inflation has increased to well over 5%. It's well over the general inflation rate on the same time of this year. The British Retail Consortium have said it could get as high as 6% come December and carry on above 5% well into next year. You know, we've got a budget next month as well. Who knows what could happen there?
But the fact of the matter is, meanwhile, I hear from farmers all the time who are telling me they're getting paid less for sugar beets, they're getting paid less for wheat, for milk, for cauliflower, you name it. While prices are going through the roof, profits are going through the roof, but not for farmers, but for the supermarkets.
Yeah, we're really struggling with our the cost of our inputs at the moment. Everything's doubled in price. And we're not seeing that return at the farm gate. You know, we've got to the point now we just don't know how we're going to go on. Like you've said just a minute ago, your viewers and a lot of the public think that we're having the profit out of it, and it's just not true. You know, I'd welcome anybody to come onto my farm. I'd open my books and show them what I'm having to pay for my inputs. Just come out and have a look, and we'll tell you the true story.
And the fact of the matter is, margins are going down on dairy, margins are going down on beef. It's becoming more and more expensive to even produce the blooming stuff. The government seems to have a war against red meat anyway. Do you feel sometimes, particularly when you look at the inheritance tax raid that was brought in, and we heard this week no signs to do a U-turn on that, Kurt, do you sometimes feel that the political class have some sort of vendetta against farmers?
Definitely that. You know, going back to the milk prices we've seen over the last couple of weeks, there's been a 6 to 8p a litre drop for the dairies, yet it's gone up in the supermarkets. Going back to the IHT, I was up at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool a couple of weeks ago, talking to the delegates as we're going in, or trying to speak to the delegates, and they just look at the pavement, look at their shoes, look at the floor. They're just not interested in talking to the people in the countryside to start talking about the facts. And this £1 million on the IHT, it's just absolutely ridiculous. In 2 generations, there's not going to be any farms left in this country.
Kurt Morton, what could be done about the big supermarkets? I mean, we've heard this perennial story now for years and years and years. Every time farmers go to renegotiate deals, they're getting smaller margins, and they're the only industry in the world, as I understand it, who don't even get to set the prices of what you sell. You're told the price of what you're allowed to sell your produce at, and that, of course, has to absorb all of your extra costs. Is it time, do you think, for a future government or a present government to actually sit down with the big supermarkets and say this has got to stop?
Exactly that. We're price takers, not price makers, and it's been like that for many years now. So I can't remember the second part of your question there, Martin. Sorry, repeat that again.
Well, the second part of the question is it time to sit down with Tesco, with Asda, with Morrison's, with all of them and say, this isn't fair. You're literally killing the golden goose that's laying the egg. And unless you start treating farmers with respect and paying them a fair wage, then the British farming industry is going to go off a cliff.
Definitely that. I think we need a decent ombudsman to come in, you know, and evaluate what's going on. You know, these supermarkets' profits are going up year on year, and they're looking to go up next year as well. Well, the public are noticing it. It's got to stop.
And the thing about all of this, Kurt, that frustrates me is that if you say, well, the price of milk has to go up because we need to pay farmers more, it means that they'll just put the price up to consumers. So this grocery inflation will go even higher. What should happen is that the profit margin of the supermarkets should absorb the price increase. So you boys get a fair price, you get a fair crack of the whip, the consumer gets a fair price, and actually the big supermarkets start coughing up their fair share.
Definitely that. And, we're also seeing shrinkflation in the supermarkets, aren't we? Smaller products for inflated prices as well.
Yeah, I mean, I know all about that myself. Thank you very much. I just think, how many more times can we have this conversation about farming feeling the pinch through inheritance tax, through decreased margins before, how many people you speak to, Kurt Morton, are just throwing the towel in?
A lot of people, this year in particular, you've only got to see through the auctioneers having machinery auctions, the farms for sale. People are feeling the pinch now, and it can't go on. You say, how many more times are we going to speak like this? It's not going to be much longer, I can promise you that. We can't stand it.
Now, no Farmers to Action you've been out and about protesting a lot earlier this year. Do you think as the budget comes through, we're going to see an increase in action on the streets, perhaps even something a bit fruitier, a bit more gilets jaunes, a bit more French-like potentially?
Well, we've been lobbying with MPs. We thought they were listening to us. They've not actually been listening to us, and that was evident at the conference a few weeks ago. So, yeah, who knows? Things might start to step up a little bit now. I don't think we're like the French, are we, in many ways, but possibly we ought to be. But, yeah, things are going to start stepping up a little bit.
Well, there we go. I mean, how many more times can the government sort of get these warnings before action is taken? Of course, nobody would ever like to be entirely like the French. Thank you, Kurt Morton from Farmers to Action. A pleasure to have you on the show today. Mind how you go. Thank you very much indeed. Now, if you're in search of some holiday sun this year, then here is the forecast for some of the top European destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Half-term has already started for some of us, but I'm afraid there's not much holiday sun to go around. Parts of Greece will see heavy showers and thunderstorms. Also, many areas of northern Europe will continue to see unsettled weather. Heavy showers, also some strong gusty winds, particularly around northern coasts of Spain and around coasts of France. Italy too will see some heavy showers, and Greece could see some quite intense thunderstorms with hail and gusty winds. These are set to continue as we head later into the week, with hopefully the return of some sunshine over the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m. only on GB News.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Nana Acquia. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
I think solo travel can be really enriching. I think it helps build so many different skills. You have to problem solve, navigate different social interactions. It can be great for building confidence, mental health, resilience, and the interactions you have with people tend to be richer when you're traveling on your own. So I'm all for it. I think it can really help reset the mind and give you that confidence boost for sure.
70% of solo travellers are women. Why do you think that is?
I think in general, post-pandemic, we have seen people prioritising travel. I think because it was taken away from us and restricted for quite a long time, we've seen this general overall trend that people are prioritising travel, spending more on travel. And I think women in particular, in general, we do tend to get pulled in so many different directions. If you're a working mother and a partner, our lives are so hectic, and solo travel, I guess, for women just gives them a chance to have a little bit of a breather, have a little bit of an escape, recharge, and hopefully come back after their trip, you know, in a healthier, more refreshed mindset.
GB News, the People's Channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back now. Unscrupulous retailers have been targeted in the UK's biggest ever operation against shoplifting. The Metropolitan Police targeted more than 120 small businesses in London who are suspected of buying and reselling goods stolen from big high street shop chains. Our Home and Security editor Mark White was given exclusive access to one of those operations.
Across the capital, hundreds of officers have been mobilised. This is the biggest ever operation against the scourge of shoplifting. Shockingly, those they're after today are other retailers, small independent businesses fueling crime against major store chains by purchasing and reselling stolen goods. This business in South East London is suspected of being part of that illegal trade.
All of these goods are going somewhere. So all of the things that these prolific offenders are stealing en masse are not just vanishing into thin air. So that is where we started to work on our intelligence and improving our intelligence gathering capabilities. And that is what led to this pattern that we're seeing very regularly, where large multiple supermarket chains are being stolen from en masse, and that those goods are appearing in very nearby smaller independent stores.
Yeah, okay. Mate, you're under arrest, okay, for shoplifting. Yeah, I'll save you.
So often in recent years, shoplifting has been a low priority for many forces. But having reached epidemic levels, with retailers pointing to roughly 6 million offences each year, authorities are devoting many more resources to fighting retail crime.
Show me.
Here they're using the latest in DNA markings to help officers identify stolen goods, using specially trained sniffer dogs and ultraviolet lamps.
Shop theft is something of a scourge, but obviously retailers need to do what they can to prevent it. So this is a product that acts as a deterrent to deter people away from stores. So yeah, its popularity is increasing.
Police have imposed a temporary closure of this shop while their searches continue. Now, if they find that this business has been dealing in stolen goods, then they'll apply to the courts for a more permanent closure of the shop.
Mate, we've got a warrant here to search his property.
Police say the vast majority of the crime that blights so many high streets is committed by a relatively small number of prolific offenders who, for the most part, are addicted to drugs and alcohol. They're now being targeted by specialist police teams, but so too are the unscrupulous shop owners who are exacerbating the surge in crime against their own neighbours by selling on those stolen goods. Mark White, GB News.
Well, Mark White joins us now. Mark White, the fencing of stolen goods is as old as the hills, straight out of a script from Only Fools and Horses. But these plonkers, they take the biscuit. In fact, they take anything they get their hands on.
Yeah, I mean, I think the traditional view of what happens to these items that are stolen from shops is they're taken down the local pub or to the market or wherever, and they're passed on to other people that way. But the very fact that you've got retailers on the very same high street as some of these big stores actively buying stolen goods and knowing that they're buying stolen goods, just exacerbating this absolute and utter misery that's being committed in town centres right across the country every single day, every minute of every single day. Finally, after years of this being quite a low priority, we are seeing police forces, Martin, now putting more resources into trying to tackle this, but it is an enormous problem. Official figures, just over 500,000 shop thefts reported to the police last year, an all-time record, by the way, but actually the retail section or the retailers' representatives say that it's many millions, upwards of 6 million, and that's an underestimate, they believe, of the type of shoplifting that's going on.
Mark White, an excellent package, thought-provoking as ever. I know those streets, I know those shops. I always knew they were dodgy, always thought they were. Now I know it. Mark White, thank you very much for joining us on the show today. Superb as ever. Now, coming next, we'll be getting more reaction to claims that the Labour Party are sabotaging the grooming gangs inquiry. A scandal across the nation. What's the truth? We'll get to the nub of it. You're with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News, Britain's 2 channel. Now, though, it's your weather with Alex.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello again, I'm here with your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Through the rest of today, yes, there will be some showery rain still, but a lot of this is actually going to ease as we head through the evening and overnight. I do actually want to highlight an area of low pressure currently out in the Atlantic. That's heading our way. It's going to bring some very wet and windy weather to southern parts later tomorrow and into Thursday. But before all that, yes, still some showery bursts through the rest of today, but into the evening and overnight, they're easing. Lots of places turning largely dry, lots of clear skies around, and with those clear skies then temperatures are going to drop just a little bit lower than they have done through some recent nights. So a bit of a fresh start for some of us, rural spots getting close to freezing, and we could see some pockets of mist and fog first thing as well. It is then going to be a generally bright, albeit fresh start to the day for many of us tomorrow. Across some southern parts of England, largely dry, just 1 or 2 showers perhaps towards coastal parts of Cornwall, and similar some coastal showers of parts of Wales. Across Northern Ireland, it's mostly dry towards the east, a few showers starting to push in from the west, and also a bit of a west-east split across much of Scotland too. Cloudy, a bit wetter towards the west, some stronger winds here. Meanwhile, in the east and down the eastern side of northern England too, lots of fine bright weather to start the day once any mist and fog patches burn away. Through the day itself, still a few showery bursts across northern western parts, but otherwise most places having a lot of fine weather, probably the driest day of the week for many places, albeit later on we are going to see cloud building from the southwest with that rain arriving as well. With a bit more sunshine and generally light winds for many, it won't feel too bad. Relatively warm with temperatures peaking in the mid-teens, but then things turn cloudy, wet and windy across southern parts as that system that I highlighted at the start pushes its way in. Now we are going to see more very wet and windy weather to come, particularly across southern and eastern parts as we go through Thursday, and then a showery day on Friday before things turn drier but colder by Saturday.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, this is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. Significant disruptions are occurring on UK roads this afternoon. On the M48, both directions have a 7.5 tonnes weight restriction for heavy goods vehicles, in force from tomorrow until further notice. In Surrey, a broken down vehicle on the A3 southbound between the A283 Milford North and the A333 is causing delays, with one of 2 lanes closed. And on the trains, the cross-country services are facing major disruptions between Cambridge and Audley End, and the Gatwick Express is currently not in service. Listeners are advised to plan their journeys accordingly and stay up to date on the latest travel developments. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
There's 2 weeks remaining in our latest, greatest giveaway. You could be in the driving seat of this Benamar Primera motorhome. This luxurious home from home comes with all the mod cons. Plus, you can use it with your current driving licence. We'll also boost your bank account with a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like. It only takes one entry to become a winner. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entry start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB16 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 31st of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pierce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There, you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News.
Very, very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live across the UK. All the very latest news, debate and analysis all the way through until 6 p.m. And here's what's coming up on today's action-packed show. Is a national inquiry into rape gangs being sabotaged by the Labour Party? Well, with survivors quitting over allegations they were gagged. On today's show, I'll be joined by a father whose daughter was groomed and is now on the inquiry's panel, who claims this is the biggest scandal in British history. And the UK borrowed a whopping £20.2 billion in September, and that's topped only by the COVID lockdown September of 2020. As national debt climbs towards an astonishing £3 trillion, will the Labour Party's high-tax, high-spend strategy make Britain go bust? And a shocking new report has mapped what proportion of social housing in Britain is now occupied by immigrants. Across London, it's an incredible 47.6%, but in some boroughs, it's as high as 73%. Is it time to limit access to social housing for immigrants? And finally, put British tenants first. And today, MPs will vote on whether to publish crime data by the offender's country of origin. Will they vote for truth and transparency, which could show, for example, that Afghans are 22 times more likely to be sex offenders, or will they vote for a cover-up? And the number of young people not in education, employment or training, the so-called NEETs, is on track to hit 1 million for the first time in over a decade. Are Britain's youngsters lazy or, faced with soaring immigration, joblessness and soaring housing prices, or are they simply giving up? That's all coming up in your next hour. "73% of social housing in some boroughs of London are occupied by immigrants. Three-quarters of social housing. How many times do you hear about waiting lists, months, years? There's no wonder, because if you come to Britain and you come to Britain as an immigrant, you are seemingly put at the front of the queue. Is that true, or is it a myth? Well, I'm joined by Alp Mehmet in the studio from Migration Watch. It is true, and we've got the facts. It's going to blow your mind, and it's not just London. It's all across the United Kingdom. We're not building houses, but we're seemingly giving them away, and the great British lottery where everybody's a winner unless you're born in Britain. Stay tuned for that. gbnews.com/You'll Say is a way to do so. But now it's time for your headlines, and here's Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you. The top stories. US President Donald Trump has issued a warning to Hamas on his Truth Social account. He says if Hamas don't do the right thing, their end will be fast, furious and brutal. Donald Trump's 20-point ceasefire plan calls for Hamas to disarm and for steps towards a Palestinian state, demands both sides have yet to fully accept. It comes as US Vice President J.D. Vance arrived in Israel as Washington pushes to stabilise the fragile Gaza ceasefire. His visit follows talks between Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner as Hamas leaders meet mediators in Cairo. Mr Vance is expected to visit military command centres overseeing Gaza's stabilisation efforts amid renewed clashes and disputes over aid and hostage returns. Annie Hudson, the front-runner to chair the government's national grooming gangs inquiry, has quit, deepening the crisis around the already troubled investigation. Sources say she withdrew before interviews took place, telling officials she was no longer interested following recent media coverage. Her exit comes after 3 survivors on the victims' panel have now resigned, accusing the Home Office of delays, secrecy and losing their trust. Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp says the inquiry has descended into chaos and that survivors have no faith in the process.
When calls for a national inquiry became public in January, the Prime Minister smeared campaigners as jumping on a far-right bandwagon. Comments like that are a disgrace and are what led to this scandal being covered up in the first place. Months later, just 2 days before facing a vote in Parliament, the government finally agreed to the inquiry. But it's clear the government never wanted this inquiry, they were forced into it. Perhaps that is why, months later, the government has said nothing substantive publicly and their inquiry is descending into chaos.
But Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips insists the government remains committed to uncovering the truth.
Baroness Casey said to this House in the Home Affairs Select Committee she did not want a traditional judicial-led inquiry. She was explicit. And if anyone in this House can find me an institution that didn't fail these girls over the years, including our courts, who took the children away from the grooming gang victims, who criminalised some of them, there is no institution in our country that hasn't failed.
In other news, the ghostwriter of Virginia Giuffre's memoir Nobody's Girl has called on Prince Andrew to tell US police everything he knows about Jeffrey Epstein's abuse. Amy Wallace says the Duke of York needs to speak about his own moral compass, claiming his silence continues to hurt victims. The lawyer Gloria Allred, who represents several of Epstein's victims, echoed the call, urging Andrew to cooperate with investigators about what he may have witnessed at Epstein's Manhattan home. Prince Andrew continues to deny all wrongdoing. But senior Tory Robert Jenrick claims the public is sick of him.
He's disgraced himself, he's embarrassed the royal family time and again. He should just go and lead a quiet life now, away from the public gaze. He certainly shouldn't be drawing on the taxpayer in any way. No more subsidies for luxury homes for him. Enough is enough.
Boris Johnson has told the COVID inquiry we probably did go too far with lockdown rules, particularly for children. Mr Johnson told the inquiry closing schools during the pandemic was a nightmare idea, but insists he was left with no choice. The former Prime Minister, who launched the inquiry himself in 2022, denied there'd been a failure to plan, contradicting evidence from his former Education Secretary, Sir Gavin Williamson. Mr Johnson said he hoped schools would stay open, but the pace of the pandemic made closures unavoidable. It's his second appearance at the inquiry, where he previously apologised for the pain and loss caused by COVID. Elsewhere, the Conservatives say more than 2,000 prisoners convicted of rape, stalking and grooming could be freed early under the government's new sentencing bill. They've tabled an amendment to block what they call an insult to victims, warning dangerous offenders should serve their full terms. But ministers have hit back, accusing the Tories of hypocrisy, pointing out that thousands of serious criminals were also released early when they were in power. The government insists the new bill is designed to ease overcrowding while keeping the public safe. And Israeli football club Maccabi Tel Aviv says it will refuse any tickets for next month's Europa League match at Aston Villa over safety concerns for its supporters. It follows a decision by Birmingham's Safety Advisory Group to ban Maccabi fans from attending, a move the government later urged to be overturned. But the club says a toxic atmosphere and hate-filled falsehoods have left fans fearing for their safety. The government said it's deeply saddened by the situation, calling it completely unacceptable that the match is being used to stir up violence and fear. Those are the latest headlines for now. More in half an hour.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of the markets. The pound buying you $1.3389 and €1.1518. The price of gold is £3,185.75 per ounce. The FTSE 100 is at 9,433 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now, a third survivor has quit the government's grooming gangs inquiry, warning it's become a staged, managed situation and disconnected from victims. The Rotherham survivor told GB News she'd lost faith in the process altogether, adding survivors feel silenced and the truth about grooming gangs is still being buried. Well, for more reaction, I'm joined in the studio by GB News' political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, the front pages make terrible reading for Downing Street. Sabotage is the word they're using. 3 survivors have now resigned from this grooming gang panel. And earlier on today, Annie Hudson, who's a former director of children's services for Lambeth, has walked away potentially from the top job. She simply feels that the job is too politically toxic. This was meant to be the moment when the Labour Party finally were dragged screaming and kicking into a rape gang inquiry. It's turning into a total farce.
It is, and we asked the government this morning, number 10, is it in crisis? The answer was no. I would say surprisingly, I think it is in crisis, by the way. It is one of the greatest scandals, they said, in our country's history. They understand the gravity of it, getting justice for the victims, they say. But look at the actions. We haven't yet got a timeline, no date for the start of the work, no idea what the chair will look at. Will it be widened beyond Muslim groups into a wider grooming issue, which the victims say must not happen? We are told, by the way, that won't happen by number 10 earlier today. And they do say that a disproportionate number of Asian men have been responsible for the grooming gang scandal. But this whole space needs handling really carefully. These women, who 3 of them now quit from the advisory group to the inquiry, they need looking after. Their interests must come first. We are told by sources that the Home Office is reaching out to the 2 who resigned yesterday, and probably to the one who resigned today as well. They need really carefully handling. If you lose their respect and their confidence in the process, it's all over.
Worse than that, Chris. It takes so much bravery and courage for them to come forward and let's face it, re-traumatise themselves by going through this process again. They deserve much better than to be let down like this. And I'll be speaking to a father at 5 o'clock whose daughter is on this panel, and I believe she is on the verge of walking away as well. The word sabotage is a strong word, and no doubt number 10 would deny that. But it does feel to a lot of people out there that the Labour Party didn't want to do this inquiry in the first place. It was against their political will, if you like. They were dragged into it, and the findings could be damning, because a lot of this happened on Labour Party patches.
I would say and Tory watch, though. I think it goes way back into the noughties, and through the teens. That was certainly under the Conservative Party watch. And in fact, you heard, didn't you, from previous people who carried out the reviews, that they believe the Tory government turned a deaf ear to this. But you know, if Labour were here, if the PM was here, he would say that he prosecuted lots of cases as DPP. He would say that he ordered a review of the evidence from Louise Casey. That came back, and then he went forward with the inquiry on an evidence-based idea. So they would say they're behind it, but the feeling is it would be watered down if it was widened away from Asian heritage groups. So what I've got, I should also say, a big issue we had on Friday about the Maccabi Villa game, Maccabi Tel Aviv Villa game. The government now says they are still trying to get together the numbers of police, more police resources to allow that game to happen. But it seems like the fans have gone ahead. The club itself has said, we don't want to take up our allocation for the game. So they had a chance on Friday when the PM was furious to deal with it. It's now Tuesday and nothing has happened. It's frustrating for the PM, and it shows almost how impotent you can be in Number 10. They're waiting to get evidence back of what the scale of the policing is required from the Westminster Police. That carries on. It may be that an offer is made to that football club in coming days.
The fact of the matter is the club themselves have pulled out because they don't feel that the safety of their fans can be guaranteed.
Which is appalling, and Number 10 know that's appalling. The frustration is that despite this fury from the PM about this on Friday, ordering the academy to get involved.
OK, I beg your pardon, Chris, I need to interject because JD Vance is speaking in Israel.
In the American media, in the Western media, where there's almost this desire to root for failure, that every time something bad happens, that every time that there's an act of violence, there's this inclination to say, oh, this is the end of the ceasefire, this is the end of the peace plan. It's not the end. It is, in fact, exactly how this is going to have to happen when you have people who hate each other, who have been fighting against each other for a very long time. We are doing very well. We are in a very good place. We're going to have to keep working on it, but I think we have the team to do exactly that. So with all thanks to our partners, both in Israel but all across the Gulf Arab states, Indonesia, the Turks, we are doing an amazing thing here, and I'm particularly proud of the American troops working at the command center who are coordinating this effort and making it possible. So with that, I want to thank Ambassador Steve Witkoff and turn it over to him to say a few things, and after everybody's said a few words, we'll take some questions. Thank you, guys. Steve?
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. We're really proud of what's happened here. It's an amazing effort. It's a great coordination between our partners. We have a great team. Signing this deal up was a challenge in and of itself.
JD Vance there in Israel. Now let's return to domestic politics. I'm delighted to say now I'm joined by the Conservative opposition whip, Katie Lamb. Katie, welcome to the show. Thank you for waiting patiently there while we briefly dipped into JD Vance in Israel. Could I get your thoughts straight away on what many people are now saying is a growing scandal, a farce, a sabotage, seemingly, of the rape gangs inquiry by the Labour Party?
Well, it's awful. What we've seen today and yesterday and what we've been hearing is terrible. What Ellie Ann Reynolds, what Fiona Goddard and what Elizabeth Harper have told us about what they see in the process of the inquiry so far is really worrying. And we, as you saw, you played a clip of the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, tried to bring that point to Parliament today, and the response from the government, I thought, was dismissive. I mean, these are real concerns that are being raised by survivors who are on this panel, and the government don't really seem to want to know.
To be fair, they would no doubt say that in 14 years of power, the Conservative Party also didn't launch a full inquiry. That was demanded, but now we're at the point. Is it simply too toxic a job? I mean, we're seeing the former Director of Children's Services for Lambeth walk away, Annie Hudson. Do we need to just think outside the box, perhaps bring in a serious piece of talent, a serious brain from overseas?
It will definitely be a difficult job. I think it's also worth bearing in mind that not only is this uncomfortable for lots of people and challenging to talk about, but it's also quite dangerous. We're talking about very serious organised criminals. There is very good evidence in lots of cases, a lot of which has been covered and uncovered by GBNews, that these people are also involved in drug crime, that they're also involved in weapons crime. And so it would be very reasonable for whoever is going to chair this inquiry to be very worried about that. And I think what you say is in lots of ways, quite a sensible thought, that you might need somebody to come from abroad who is completely outside of this so that they can really assess it properly.
Katie, could I ask you about some comments that you made at the weekend which have been jumped upon by your political opponents? And that was where you believe that large numbers of people with legal status in the UK would need to have their right to stay revoked and should go home.
Well, our party policy, we laid various amendments to the Borders Bill in March, and Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, laid a deportations bill earlier this year, says that if you have indefinite leave to remain, if you have settlement, that can be revoked in 3 sets of circumstances. One, if you commit a crime. Secondly, if you attempt to access state support, so benefits or social housing or any other support that the state provides. Or thirdly, if you are no longer a contributor, if your salary falls below a certain threshold, which means that you will be costing the state more than you're contributing. So that's our party policy.
OK, Katie Lamb, that was handled well, like a party leader. That's my next question. A lot of people are tipping you to be the next Conservative leader. How does that sit on your shoulders?
I am a new MP. I am very much enjoying getting to grips with the job that I've got. We've got an excellent leader with a proper plan, a really good team, and a serious backbone. And supporting her and doing everything I can for the Conservative Party is what I do all day and for my constituents, and that's what I'm going to keep doing.
Again, Katie Lamb handled like a true leader there, although I did think distinct little blush there on your cheeks. Thank you very much. That's Katie Lamb, the Conservative Opposition Whip. Thank you very much for joining us today on GB News. Just to add, in response to that story, the Home Office has told GB News this: the abuse of children by grooming gangs is one of the most horrific crimes imaginable. Any suggestion that this inquiry is being watered down is completely wrong. We are committed to delivering a robust, thorough inquiry that will get to the truth and provide the answers the survivors have so long campaigned for. We are working urgently to appoint the best chair to take forward this work and deliver justice, putting victims and survivors at the heart of this process. And it goes on. We are grateful to all of those who have shared their insights with us, and we share the concerns around unhelpful speculation while this process is live, which is why we will not be providing a running commentary. Now, moving on, a shocking new report has mapped what proportion of social housing in Britain is occupied by immigrants. Across London, it's an incredible 47.6%. But as you can see on your screens, in some boroughs, like in Wembley, it's as high as 73%. Here's the big question. Is it time to limit access to social housing for immigrants and finally put British tenants first? Well, for more reaction, let's speak to the chair of Migration Watch, Ab Mehmet, here in the studio. Ab, welcome to the studio. Always a pleasure. This data you put out on social media, these maps have caused a huge storm. Millions of people have shared these images. They're simply mind-blowing. A lot of us thought a lot of people from overseas were in social housing, but by Jove, the numbers are astonishing.
They are, and it's not a matter of restricting the housing to just those who are resident, born here, whatever. It is a matter of stopping and constraining immigration. Unless you do that, the way our laws are framed, I'm afraid that will continue. But this is not about good immigration, bad immigration, bad immigrants. This is all about the reality of what the impact of it is, the impact it's having on the availability of housing, the use it's making of social housing, the way it's pushing up huge rent increases. A rent in London is around £135 on average for social housing.
A week?
A week.
Rents many times more than that.
Private rentals are more like £520 a week.
A fifth of the price if you come from overseas and you manage to bag yourself a social house.
And it's being subsidised. That's the whole thing. I mean, this is absurd. And the fact that it's all being dismissed because it's anti-immigration, it's just a nonsense. Let's get real, people. The government has got to come to its senses. Otherwise, all these ridiculous situations where people are ending up being given homes, having recently arrived or just arrived, is just not fair.
And Alp, it's not just London. When you look at your interactive map, it is the same pattern across many of the towns we'd expect, across the Birminghams, the Burnleys, the Bradfords, the Leicesters. The pattern repeats. There's no coincidence that they are areas of high net immigration, of low-income immigration, so therefore they're on the housing lists. And you've also highlighted some data about the paucity of the number of homes being built. There aren't enough homes being built to even compete with the sheer volume coming in.
No, absolutely. If we look at what happened in the year to end June 2024, there was 755,000 people added to our population. Yeah. 755,000, of which 98% was due to migration. Do you know how long it would take to build sufficient housing for 755,000 people? Or how many?
I'm guessing end of the century.
320,000 houses are needed just for that group alone. This is without looking ahead to the numbers that are going to be coming in over the coming years. That's why we've got to constrain, we've got to restrict, we've got to stop this out-of-control immigration.
If we can't stop the volume coming in, Mehmet, what about the notion of having Brits first in the queue?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the only fair thing that you can do, for goodness sake. My grandchildren, there's a number of them who are around the 20 mark, early 20s. Yeah. All of them are living at home because they can't afford to rent flats, particularly in London. That's not good enough. That applies across the board throughout the country, and I don't think that people regard that as fair.
Mehmet, I think you're exactly right. It's a pleasure to have your company as ever. Thank you very much. Now let's get back now to JD Vance, who's speaking again in Israel.
Apparatus to put all this in place, but right now where I stand, I feel confident that we're going to be in a place where this peace lasts, where it's durable, and if Hamas doesn't cooperate, then as the President of the United States has said, Hamas is going to be obliterated. Steve, do you want to add anything about the hostages?
I think you said it, sir.
Okay, great. Ma'am.
What you were just saying, how much time does Hamas have to lay down its arms before the United States either takes dramatic action or authorizes dialogue to do so?
Well, look, the president actually put out a truth this morning that I thought was very instructive. We know that Hamas has to comply with the deal, and if Hamas doesn't comply with the deal, very bad things are going to happen. But I'm not going to do what the President of the United States has thus far refused to do, which is put an explicit deadline on it, because a lot of this stuff is difficult. A lot of this stuff is unpredictable. You basically have two regions in Gaza, one of which is relatively safe, I wouldn't say very safe, and one of which is incredibly dangerous. And part of ensuring that we get to a durable peace is to broaden the scope of the area that's safe. And the International Security Force is a big part of that. We don't yet have the International Security Force set up. That's something we're working towards. We have a number of volunteers who want to participate in that International Security Force. So my point is, I don't think it's actually advisable for us to say this has to be done in a week, because a lot of this work is very hard. It's never been done before. And in order for us to give it a chance to succeed, we've got to be a little bit flexible. I think what you're seeing from our Gulf Arab friends, certainly from our Israeli friends, is a certain amount of impatience with Hamas. But we're going to keep on working at this process, and we're going to keep on trying to bring the deceased hostages home, but also make sure that all Gazans are able to live in a prosperous and safe place. Yes. Yeah, Jared, you want to say a few words about that? Okay.
So, first of all, no reconstruction funds will be going into areas that Hamas still controls. And as far as the demilitarization goes, once the ISF is up, there needs to be a security force that they can feel safe from, that in order for it to be the transition to be complete. So that needs to happen. There are considerations being happening now in the area that the IDF controls, as long as that can be secured, to start the construction as a new Gaza, in order to give the Palestinians living in Gaza a place to go, a place to get jobs, a place to live. So that's one of the many things being considered. Right now, again, there's been several work streams that have occurred over the last years. Those are all being synthesized and updated here at the center, and then they'll go before President Trump and the Board of Peace to get recommendations on what to build, how to phase it. But that's definitely something now that's being very strongly considered.
Great. Sir? Oh, sorry. Why don't we do the guy in the back, and then we'll do you in the blue jacket. Thank you. Go ahead. Could you speak up for me? Yeah. Yeah, well, I think Steve put it best, which is that this model, I think, could serve for a foundation for normalization, not just in the Middle East, but across the world. Because what we're taking, again, is a long-term, protracted conflict with two enemies who really don't like each other, and we're actually creating a model that can lead towards sustainable peace. Now, we know that a lot of our Gulf Arab friends would like to have normalized relations with Israel. We know that getting this peace on a sustainable pathway is sort of the critical first step of that. But look, I feel very optimistic about where we are. Knock on wood, you never know how this stuff is going to go. But given what I've seen, given the incredible talent and effort that's going in to the reconstruction of Gaza, to the long-term security of the Gazans in that territory, I feel very good about where we are. And again, if we get this right, I really do think it's going to be a domino that leads to a lot of further peace all across the region. Sir. Well, so on the first question, no. My visit had nothing to do with events of the past 48 hours. We had actually tried to plan this visit, frankly, months ago, and now we thought this would be a good time to do it. It ended up working out. As you know, sometimes calendars are difficult, especially when you're the Vice President of the United States. But I wanted to come. I wanted to check in on things. I wanted to, talk to the troops who are working very hard to coordinate this massive relief effort. And I wanted to just see how things are going and put some eyes on it so I could call the President of the United States and actually, it's one thing to read about it. It's one thing to talk with Jared and Steve on the phone about what's going on the ground. It's another thing to actually shake somebody's hand, to look them in the eye and to understand what are the challenges, what are the things they need from me. I mean, I heard from relatively junior troops very simple things that would make their lives easier that I'm going to take back to Washington and hopefully help them with. That's why you do a visit like this, not because of anything that's happening on the ground. On your question about what is the ultimate, authority in Gaza look like, I don't know the answer to that question. And I think what's so cool, what's so amazing about what these guys have done is that we're creating a governance structure that is very flexible to what happens on the ground in the future. We need to reconstitute Gaza. We need to reconstruct Gaza. We need to make sure that both the Palestinians living in Gaza, but also the Israelis are able to live in some measure of security and stability. We're doing all those things simultaneously. And then I think once we've got to a point where both the Gazans and our Israeli friends can have some measure of security, then we'll worry about what the long-term governance of Gaza is. Let's focus on security, rebuilding, giving people some food and medicine. If we get to the point where we're arguing exactly what the governance structure in Gaza is long-term, then we should pat ourselves on the back. That's a very good problem to have, but I won't anticipate that problem before we actually have it. I'll take a couple more and then we'll get moving. Ma'am. Could you speak up? Thank you. Well, the incentives are that unless Hamas disarms in accordance with the agreement, very bad things are going to happen, right? And also the incentive is that if they disarm, there is a better future for everybody on the other side of it. But in terms of the international security force, Steve and Jared, Admiral Cooper, are working on that very issue right now. Remember, this peace deal was struck under the president's leadership literally a week ago. The hostages were returned, 6 days ago, 5 days ago? So we're in the phase now where we're actually starting to conceptualize what that international security force would look like. I think it's important for Americans to know a couple of things. Number one, there are not going to be American boots on the ground in Gaza. The President of the United States has made that very clear. All of our military leadership has made that very clear. What we can do is provide some useful coordination. How do you take, the Gulf Arab states, plus Israel, plus plus the Turks, plus the Indonesians? How do you actually get those folks to work together in a way that actually produces long-term peace? The only real mediators are the United States of America. And so that's the role that we're going to play. I think the American people should be proud of it, but they should know that there are going to be no American boots on the ground in Gaza. Sir, in the back. Could you ask the very last part? Well, I'm not going to make any announcements here today. The President of the United States has been very clear about our policy with regards to Iran. It's that he actually wants Iran to be prosperous. He wants to have good relations with the Iranians, but they cannot have a nuclear weapon. And so we're going to keep on using and exhausting every diplomatic means possible to try to ensure that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. That's our focus, and that will remain our focus for the indefinite future. Let me just leave us with one final thought here. So I've been to Israel once in my entire life. I came for about 36 hours, and as a Christian, I think the world's Christians will know that this country, that this region of the world means a great deal to me. And at some point today, I hope to go, or at some point in the next couple of days, I should say, I hope to go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which Christians believe is the site that Jesus Christ was crucified in. And I know that Christians have many titles for Jesus Christ, and one of them is the Prince of Peace. And I'd ask all people of faith, in particular my fellow Christians, to pray that the Prince of Peace can continue to work a miracle in this region of the world. I think that we have made incredible strides over the past week. We're going to have to make a lot more, but I think with your prayers, with God's providence, and with a very good team behind me, I think we're going to get it done. Thank you all. Take care.
That is J.D. Vance there giving a whistle-stop press conference in southern Israel, announcing the Civilian Military Cooperation Centre to begin rebuilding Gaza, and was laying into the press a common theme from the Trump regime, blaming them for a weird attitude, seeming to want the ceasefire to fail. J.D. Vance there spreading the peace mission in Israel. Now let's move on, because it's been revealed that a Christian charity has been baptising migrants in hotel bathtubs in order to boost their asylum claims. Well, several migrants from Muslim-majority countries have won asylum under the European Convention on Human Rights by arguing they would face persecution if returned to their home countries, despite concerns that many are faking religious conversions to stay in the United Kingdom. Let's now speak with the editor of the New English Catholic Substack, and that is Dr. Gavin Ashenden. Gavin, always a pleasure to have your company. Here we go again. We heard before, earlier in the year, about industrial-scale mass conversions, people suddenly wanting to be a Christian to avoid deportation, suddenly coming out of the closet and becoming LGBTQ to avoid deportation. But seriously, baptisms in bathtubs, in hotels, paid for by British taxpayers, this is really taking the biscuit.
Well, the biscuit's already really taken by unknown numbers of Muslims who want to become gay Christians suddenly in order to substantiate their asylum claims. The trouble is, it gets worse every time. One of the really offensive things is that there are indeed a number of people who become Christian and are entitled to seek asylum on that basis. And this group here is simply lowering the currency of something that is enormously important. Well, one of the things, it's so easy to check up on this. If someone wants to become a Christian, they have to join the church. And by joining the church, they're then accountable. They join a group of people. They become part of a community. It's very straightforward to see whether or not this is authentic. The idea of having a small American Christian fundamentalist sect, which is actually sub-Christian, they don't believe in the Trinity, baptizing people in baths in order, I mean, I don't know what's in it for them, but what's in it for the rest of us is they're destroying something very precious and very important, and that we want to be able to rely on in good faith.
And isn't that the point? You can look at how the system potentially is being gamed by those outside of our national interests who want to stay as a part of the country, using a miraculous conversion to Christianity as a way to maintain their right to remain on British soil. But let's look at the motives of individuals at places like CareLinks Ministries. They advertise online. They perform this ad hoc baptism, this sudden awakening. 260 individuals were baptised thus in 30 countries last year, they bragged. And they can come to an asylum hotel near you and simply dunk you in the porcelain in your asylum seeker hotel bathroom, and you take a short introductory book, Bible Basics. It's a complete beginner's guide to Christianity, and suddenly you're a bona fide man of the cloth, no longer a Muslim, suddenly a Christian free to remain in the UK. Let's be honest, this is an utter farce.
Well, it really is, and if we can't control the sect, who are presumably getting money and publicity out of it, At least we can ask the government to do their job. I mean, the government's job, which they're constantly failing, is to protect our borders and to give the asylum system some integrity. Well, it's the government who's emptied the asylum system of integrity by failing to simply apply both common sense and the rules. And we're being served very badly by our government. I mean, this is close to anarchy. How can you possibly believe in the status and trust of the people who rule us? This has got to stop. We need to protest loudly.
Dr. Ashenden, far be it from me to question somebody else's beliefs or their Christianity or their values, but I want to put this to you. The desire to save, the desire to help people integrate is no doubt laudable. Every soul saved is a soul cherished and all the rest of it. But are these people being taken as, at best, useful idiots?
Well, yes, they are. I mean, the thing is, if you look at the Catholic Church, if you want to become a Catholic, it usually takes up to 9 months or a year. You get baptized at Easter. The whole system is very carefully monitored. Tested is the wrong word, but I mean, your integrity is under examination all the way through. What we're dealing here is with some fringe sects who are, for some very strange reason, are just following a set of rules that is accessible only to them and that no one's checking up on. So once again, they're taking something precious, important, and that's easily manageable in the right adult circumstances, and they're abusing it. And so and by doing so, they're damaging the real asylum seekers. They're damaging the real converts. And these are people we feel deeply for and want to protect.
No, Dr. Gavin Ashenden, it really is one of those stories where I sincerely don't know whether to laugh or cry. But here we are. Thanks again for trying to help me make sense of it in your best possible fashion. Dr. Gavin Ashenden, thank you very much for joining me today on GB News. Now, a spokesman for CareLinks Ministries, the charity responsible for carrying out these bathtub baptisms, well, they issued the following statement. CareLinks takes no part in the process of helping any individual to claim asylum. Applications for asylum are a private matter between the claimant and the state, and is up to the claimants to show to the tribunal that their conversion to Christianity is genuine. And the Home Office issued the following statement as well. The UK has a proud history of welcoming those who are genuinely fleeing religious persecution. Religious conversions do not guarantee refugee status, and all asylum applications are carefully considered on their individual merits. Now moving on to more fresh madness, because the frontman of the pop duo Bob Vylan, yeah, him again, well, he said that he has no regrets over his death to the IDF chant at Glastonbury, adding that he would do the whole thing all over again. Let's remind ourselves now of that infamous moment.
Death, death to the IDF! Death, death to the IDF!
Well, justifying his actions, Mr. Vylan, well, he claimed that any backlash he received was minimal compared to what Palestinians are currently going through, and even added that some BBC staff even praised him for his actions at Glastonbury, in stark contrast to the pearl-clutching reaction we got from the BBC at the time. Well, to discuss this, I'm joined in the studio, I'm delighted to say, by the columnist and the broadcaster, Jake Wallace-Simons. Jake, a pleasure to have your company, even in these idiotic circumstances. I put it to you. The definition of insanity is repeating the same thing and expecting a different outcome. Last time round, Bob Vylan was condemned all across the West, all across the world. Well, he's only gone and done it again.
Well, of course he has, because he keeps getting, egged on, not least by Louis Theroux, who's interviewed him on this occasion. It feels to me as if this interview with Bob Vylan is, if nothing else, an act of trolling against the Jewish community. We're just reeling from the news that Israeli fans have been banned from a football match in Birmingham because they're Israeli, on top of the Manchester killings, on top of the fact that we're in a heightened security environment. Jews are living day to day with security guards, extra security guards at their synagogues and schools and so forth. And now this, the man who popularised the chant "Death to the IDF," is now being welcomed on to an interview with Louis Theroux to spread his bile further. Now, I was going to say that imagine if he had said death to any other ethnic group, Muslims or black people or whatever. But actually, in this day and age, if he had said death to Hamas, people would have been there would be more of an outcry than death to the IDF. I think that's the point where we've arrived. There's more sympathy for the jihadis who would have us all dead than there is for the army defending the only liberal democracy in the Middle East.
Bob Villan has made absolutely abundantly clear to him by Donald Trump and the Trump regime he will never work in America. You know, so that phase of his career, that leg of it, is over. And yet here we are. 5 minutes later, he's welcomed back into the bosom of the media elite.
Yeah, I mean, he was always going to become an icon for the real nutters, the fringes, the radicals. Unfortunately, the number of nutters is multiplying over the last 2 years, and the fringes coming closer and closer to the centre, endorsed initially by the BBC, who had to apologise for not pulling it from their live broadcast, of course, but also now by Louis Theroux, top interviewer, household name almost, very famous man, who's dignifying Bob Villan by giving him this major platform. And some of the things that Louis Theroux was saying to Bob Villan, let alone what Bob Villan was saying, were hugely objectionable. Louis Theroux put to him the argument that Israel was responsible for an ethno-nationalism prototype that was being picked up by white identitarians all over the world. Offensive stuff from Theroux, from the interviewer, let alone from Bob Villan. This stuff is becoming mainstream, and Jews are feeling it every day.
Jake, could I ask you about the allegation that Mr. Villan said that nobody thought anything about it? Nobody, even staff at the BBC, were like, that was fantastic. We loved that. BBC, of course, would deny that. But would you be surprised if the BBC staff on the ground at Glastonbury thought it was a hijinks, it was a hoot to say what he said?
It may amaze you, Martin, that it would come as no surprise to either to me, to you, or to the many viewers of this programme. The BBC is trying to control itself from being overtly pro-Palestinian and doing a bad job at it, because basically the private views of pretty much all the people working for the BBC are very, very pro-Palestinian. I would say bordering on pro-Hamas, and it's trying to impose this impartiality on itself, despite itself. The problem with the BBC, it hasn't got enough of a variety of people. The number of people who are pro-Israel, i.e. pro-Western democracy, pro-our civilization, is worryingly small, I think, amongst BBC staffers, and this is just an example of that.
Jake, I have to ask you about your opinion. You touched upon it a moment ago about the fan ban from Villa Park, Maccabi, Tel Aviv. Of course, let's not forget, they stopped their own fans coming here because they felt they couldn't be guaranteed safety on the streets of Birmingham. They didn't want to take the risk. Now, if they can't risk their own fans walking the streets of Birmingham, what does the Jewish community feel like now walking the streets of Birmingham?
Exactly. I mean, the thing that really enrages me about this is that the British public have been sold a lie. And the lie is that people, everyday people in Birmingham, are somehow at risk from Israeli fascists, hooligans, yobs, genociders or whatever, and it's actually a public safety issue. It's not. The campaign against the Israeli team was started on the day of the draw. There was that petition. We've had an imam, a local imam in Birmingham, saying that he would show no mercy to the Israeli fans coming to Birmingham. The problem is that the threat is actually being directed at the Israelis, not from the Israelis. And the whole thing stinks to me very strongly of anti-Semitism. I think that most right-thinking people can see it, but it's being packaged as, oh, you know, don't accuse us of being anti-Semitic. It's only to protect the great British public. It's not. That's a lie.
Very quickly, has the Prime Minister completely failed the Jewish community by not allowing these fans into Britain?
Well, the Prime Minister, only the day before this scandal blew up, visited the Community Security Trust, the Jewish charity looking after Jewish security, and vowed to protect the Jewish people. The very next day, he had an opportunity to put his money where his mouth is, and he didn't seem to have enough money to make it happen. So another failure for Starmer, but not the first. Let's not forget that he delighted Hamas by granting the recognition of a Palestinian state without demanding them to release any hostages. Then Hamas were celebrating the following week when there was that attack on the synagogue in Manchester. The Prime Minister was lamenting it, having set the conditions for this anti-Semitism in Britain. It's not good enough.
Jake Wallace-Simon, it's always an absolute pleasure to have your company, and thank you for coming to the studio here today to see us in Westminster at GB News. Now, Bob Villan has said in response to this story, the backlash the band had faced was minimal compared to what people in Palestine are going through. I don't want to overstate the importance of the chant, he added. That's not what I'm trying to do, but if I have their support, they're the people that I'm doing it for. They're the people that I'm being vocal for. Then what is there to regret? Oh, because I've upset some right-wing politician or some right-wing media. Well, we've also approached for the BBC for comment, but so far we haven't had a response. If you're searching some holiday sun this year, then here is the forecast for some of the top European destinations.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Half-term has already started for some of us, but I'm afraid there's not much holiday sun to go around. Parts of Greece will see heavy showers and thunderstorms. Also, many areas of northern Europe will continue to see unsettled weather. Heavy showers, also some strong gusty winds, particularly around northern coasts of Spain and around coasts of France. Italy too will see some heavy showers, and Greece could see some quite intense thunderstorms with hail and gusty winds. These are set to continue as we head later into the week, with hopefully the return of some sunshine over the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m. only on GB News.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
It's got this funny aspect, hasn't it? That calling Nelson queer is funny, but it isn't. In a way, it's not funny at all. It's just part of a very large project to not only pretend that trans people started the gay rights movement and that everybody has a gender identity. But I don't know if you know, the University of Leicester has got this wonderful organisation, the Research Centre for Museums and Galleries, which also links up with NEMO. This is a European-wide organisation, and they hold events about queering the museums. So the museums are being fed this bonkers nonsense, yes, by organisations that we're funding, and I think this has to stop. It really has to stop.
Bev, Michelle here. Sorry to cut in and take this back to basics, but some of my viewers might be sitting there and they're not down with the latest iterations of the alphabet soup, so they might not actually even know what is queer.
Well, it's a good question, isn't it? Queer used to be, and in my mind still is, an insult. A lot of gay men, especially older gay men, remember being called queer just before they were beaten up. So for them, and for many people, and including for me as well, queer is an insult. But lots of young gays and lesbians have adopted the word queer these days, but funnily enough, lots of straight people have too. So you'll find straight couples calling themselves queer because they think their sex is a bit edgy or something. It's completely debased the whole notion of what it was, of what gay rights was about, and people have forgotten what gay rights were about. So I don't use the word queer at all. I don't use the word LGBTQ+, because it's a jumble of different interests which actually conflict with each other. They don't belong together.
The People's Channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
Oh, no, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10 to 5. You're with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, the controversial Oxford Union President-elect, George Arabonier, well, he's been ousted after losing a no-confidence vote he called himself. Well, the 20-year-old sparks outrage, of course, after his apparent celebration of Charlie Kirk's fatal shooting, the assassination last month. Well, let's listen in to him debating Charlie Kirk at the Oxford Union back in May.
With all due respect, have you been to London the last 10 years? Men can do whatever they want.
I live in London.
Are they happier? Men can dress how they want. Men can act how they want. And go to any club. Has it worked?
Yeah, but also we've had austerity. There are other factors outside of simply just.
Do you see what you're doing, respectfully? You're scrambling for an excuse to get away from the truth that's right in front of you. I mean, maybe men should get married and have children.
There you go. Master George got decimated there. And let's get the thoughts now. The free speech activist and the Oxford Union Life member, Alan Bakari. Alan, welcome to the show. What's your thoughts on Mr. Arabonier? He's lost a landslide vote, but he doesn't seem to want to go anywhere.
No, he's really dragging the process out, but, the union members have spoken. It was an overwhelming result. Over 1,200 union members voted either remotely or in person to remove Aberonier, and I really think they made the right decision. The Oxford Union is the oldest debating society, the oldest and longest running debating society in the UK. It's a bastion of free speech. And when you celebrate political assassinations, you're celebrating the most final form of censorship, which is violence. The most final act of censorship is a bullet, and that's what Charlie Kirk received. So you can't. So, while I don't think that Mr. Aberonier should be expelled from the university necessarily, you're a 20-year-old student, you're allowed to make some mistakes and say some stupid things. Running the Oxford Union, this centre of free speech, is a completely different matter. And I think it's wholly inappropriate for him to continue to do that. And it seems like over 1,200 members of the Oxford Union agreed with that assessment.
Do you think that Mr. Aberonier is an isolated incident, or do you think there's a whole army of him, of people like him out there, a new kind of wokerati army that seem hell-bent on putting down all our institutions, including the Oxford Union?
I think there's a lot of that going around, and if you look at some of the leaked messages from Aberonier's chat, there's a general hostility towards the Oxford Union. In another leaked message, he talks about avoiding white establishments. There's this trend on the left towards, the decolonization movement. You have to decolonize every British institution, even the ones that have been here for centuries and had nothing to do with colonization, like the Oxford Union. There's also, I think, a disturbing rise in support for political violence, especially in the United States right now. We saw this at the start of the year with the firebombing attacks on Tesla stores. And you even see it in public polling when people in America, especially young people, are asked if you support political violence. There's actually a big gap between the left and the right on that question. So it's very troubling to see. And, Mr. Aberonier did take back his...
I have to interject. We have to leave it there. We've simply run out of time. Alan Bakari, thank you very much. I'm assuming you'll miss Mr. Aberonier like an ingrown toenail. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. Now, George Aberonier told GB News this. 2 centuries later, the same people who claim to believe in the union are now acting in stark opposition to the union's founding principles by supporting a campaign of harassment, censorship and abuse. We will not be silenced. Well, still to come between now and 6 p.m. MPs will soon be voting whether to publish crime data by the offender's country of origin. Will they vote for truth and transparency, or will they vote for a cover-up? That's next with me, Martin Daubney, on GB News.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello again, I'm here with your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Through the rest of today, yes, there will be some showery rain still, but a lot of this is actually going to ease as we head through the evening and overnight. I do actually want to highlight an area of low pressure currently out in the Atlantic. That's heading our way. It's going to bring some very wet and windy weather to southern parts later tomorrow and into Thursday. But before all that, yes, still some showery bursts through the rest of today, but into the evening and overnight, they're easing. Lots of places turning largely dry, lots of clear skies around, and with those clear skies then temperatures are going to drop just a little bit lower than they have done through some recent nights. So a bit of a fresh start for some of us. Rural spots getting close to freezing, and we could see some pockets of mist and fog first thing as well. It is then going to be a generally bright, albeit fresh start to the day for many of us tomorrow. Across some southern parts of England, largely dry, just 1 or 2 showers perhaps towards coastal parts of Cornwall, and similar some coastal showers for parts of Wales. Across Northern Ireland, it's mostly dry towards the east, a few showers starting to push in from the west, and also a bit of a west-east split across much of Scotland too. Cloudy, a bit wetter towards the west, some stronger winds here. Meanwhile, in the east and down the eastern side of northern England too, lots of fine bright weather to start the day once any mist and fog patches burn away. Through the day itself, still a few showery bursts across northern western parts, but otherwise most places having a lot of fine weather, probably the driest day of the week for many places, albeit later on we are going to see cloud building from the southwest with that rain arriving as well. With a bit more sunshine and generally light winds for many, it won't feel too bad. Relatively warm with temperatures peaking in the mid-teens, but then things turn cloudy, wet and windy across southern parts as that system that I highlighted at the start pushes its way in. Now we are going to see more very wet and windy weather to come, particularly across southern and eastern parts as we go through Thursday, and then a showery day on Friday before things turn drier but colder by Saturday.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Boxed Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBnews.com. On the M8 westbound, a vehicle breakdown at junction 7, A exit slip to the A725 requires caution. The A494 eastbound is closed from Queensferry to Deeside Industrial Park due to an accident. In Trafford, the M60 clockwise between junctions 9 and 10 has 10-minute delays due to congestion. A collision on the M6 southbound in Staffordshire between junctions 15 and 14 has closed one lane, with a 40-minute delay expected. And on the trains, Gatwick Express has no service, and East Midlands Railway faces disruption. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
There's 2 weeks remaining in our latest, greatest giveaway. You could be in the driving seat of this Benamar Primera motorhome. This luxurious home from home comes with all the mod cons. Plus, you can use it with your current driving licence. We'll also boost your bank account with a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like. It only takes one entry to become a winner. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB16 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 31st of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, this is Jubes & Co with you.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie's here to GB News, Britain's news channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection, tune in to GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Very, very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting live across the UK. All the very latest news, debate and analysis all the way through until 6 p.m. And here's what's coming up on today's action-packed show. Is a national inquiry into rape gangs being sabotaged by the Labour Party? Well, with survivors quitting over allegations they were gagged. Well, today's show will be joined by a father whose daughter was groomed and is now on that inquiry's panel. And he claims this is the biggest scandal in British history. And the UK borrowed a whopping £20.2 billion in September. That's topped only by the COVID lockdown September of 2020. As national debt now climbs towards an eye-watering £3 trillion. Will the Labour Party's high-tax, high-spend regime make Britain go bust? And today, MPs will vote on whether to publish crime data by the offender's country of origin. Will they vote for truth and transparency, which could show that Afghans are 22 times more likely to be sex offenders, or will they vote for a politically correct cover-up? And a convicted killer who strangled his girlfriend stands to receive thousands of pounds in benefits from behind bars. On today's show, I'll be joined by a former Metropolitan Police officer to get her thoughts on what many people believe is a national scandal. And the number of young people not in education, employment or training is on track to hit 1 million for the first time in over a decade. Are youngsters lazy? Are they snowflakes? Or faced with soaring immigration, joblessness and rising house prices, are they simply giving up all hope? That's all coming up in your next hour. Well, the show, it's a pleasure to have your company. As we speak, parliamentarians are debating in chamber about should we, as a nation, publish data on those who commit offences, crimes in Britain along their national origin, the country they come from. They do this in Denmark. They do this in the Netherlands. They do this in Germany. And we can see time and time again the same patterns emerge. Countries such as Afghanistan, those from the Middle East, North Africa, they are much more likely to be offenders than those born in the United Kingdom. Britain doesn't publish this data. Why not? What are they trying to hide? Is publishing that data racist? Or actually, would it give us the basis of how to form effective policing and perhaps the nations that we should or should not be allowing into our country? We'll have the debate on that when it happens. Plus, I'll have some astonishing data for you on the actual reality of who's committing the most crimes in Britain. 78 nationalities more likely to be offenders versus Brits. How long can this madness go on? Get in touch. GBNews.com/your say is the way to do so. But now it's time for your headlines, and here's Tatiana Sanchez.
Martin, thank you. The top stories. Donald Trump says if Hamas don't do the right thing, their end will be fast, furious and brutal. The US president issued the warning on his Truth Social account. His 20-point ceasefire plan calls for Hamas to disarm and for steps towards a Palestinian state, demands both sides have yet to fully accept. This all comes as US Vice President J.D. Vance, who's in Israel, has said this afternoon there will be no boots on the ground in Gaza as he pushes to stabilise the fragile Gaza ceasefire. Mr. Vance also says the ceasefire is in a very good place despite violence in the Strip over the weekend. Elsewhere, Annie Hudson, the frontrunner to chair the government's national grooming gangs inquiry, has quit, deepening the crisis around the already troubled investigation. Sources say she withdrew before interviews took place, telling officials she was no longer interested following recent media coverage. Her exit comes after 3 survivors on the victims panel have now resigned, accusing the Home Office of delays, secrecy and losing their trust. Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp says the inquiry has descended into chaos and that survivors have no faith in the process.
When calls for a national inquiry became public in January, the Prime Minister smeared campaigners as jumping on a far-right bandwagon. Comments like that are a disgrace and are what led to this scandal being covered up in the first place. Months later, just 2 days before facing a vote in Parliament, the government finally agreed to the inquiry. But it's clear the government never wanted this inquiry, they were forced into it. Perhaps that is why, months later, the government has said nothing substantive publicly and their inquiry is descending into chaos.
However, the Safeguarding Minister Jess Phillips insists the government remains committed to uncovering the truth.
Baroness Casey said to this House in the Home Affairs Select Committee she did not want a traditional judicial-led inquiry. She was explicit. And if anyone in this House can find me an institution that didn't fail these girls over the years, including our courts, who took the children away from the grooming gang victims, who criminalised some of them, there is no institution in our country that hasn't failed.
In other news, the ghostwriter of Virginia Giuffre's memoir Nobody's Girl has called on Prince Andrew to tell US police everything he knows about Jeffrey Epstein's abuse. Amy Wallace says the Duke of York needs to speak about his own moral compass, claiming his silence continues to hurt victims. Lawyer Gloria Allred, who represents several of Epstein victims, echoed the call, urging Andrew to cooperate with investigators about what he may have witnessed at Epstein's Manhattan home. Prince Andrew continues to deny all wrongdoing. But senior Tory Robert Jenrick claims the public are sick of him.
He's disgraced himself, he's embarrassed the royal family time and again. He should just go and lead a quiet life now, away from the public gaze. He certainly shouldn't be drawing on the taxpayer in any way. No more subsidies for luxury homes for him. Enough is enough.
Boris Johnson has told the COVID inquiry we probably did go too far with lockdown rules, particularly for children. Mr Johnson told the inquiry closing schools during the pandemic was a nightmare idea, but insists he was left with no choice. The former Prime Minister, who launched the inquiry himself in 2022, denied there'd been a failure to plan, contradicting evidence from his former Education Secretary, Sir Gavin Williamson. Mr Johnson said he hoped schools would stay open, but the pace of the pandemic made closures unavoidable. It's his second appearance at the inquiry, where he previously apologised for the pain and loss caused by COVID. And finally, the Conservatives say more than 2,000 prisoners convicted of rape, stalking and grooming could be freed early under the government's new sentencing bill. They've tabled an amendment to block what they call an insult to victims, warning dangerous offenders should serve their full terms. But ministers have hit back, accusing the Tories of hypocrisy, pointing out that thousands of serious criminals were also released early when they were in power. The government insists the new bill is designed to ease overcrowding while keeping the public safe. Those are the latest headlines. For now, more from me in half an hour.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of the markets. The pound buying you $1.3375 and €1.1525. The price of gold, £3,085.07 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 9,429 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Tatiana. Now, the Labour Party has been accused of sabotaging the National Grooming Gangs inquiry by victims and now by campaigners. Two victims quit the liaison panel on Monday after claiming that they were being silenced, with one victim even claiming that officials wanted to downplay the ethnicity and the religious background of perpetrators. And a third survivor quit earlier today, saying she'd lost all faith in the process and that the truth about grooming gangs is still being buried. Well, I speak now to GB News' national reporter, Charlie Peters. Charlie, there's a feeling that the Labour Party was they were dragged kicking and screaming into this report in the first place, and now the allegations from those very close and, in fact, on the report itself, they seem to be thinking this is falling apart. And is that an act of sabotage, they're claiming?
Well, Martin, in April, when the government went against those original claims in January that there would be 5 local inquiries into the grooming gang scandal, the former Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, said that there had been party political misinformation being spread about the issue. Well, it wasn't party political misinformation, it was true. There are still no local inquiries. They haven't been launched, despite that commitment for at least 5. Of course, there has now been a call for a national inquiry, but over 4 months on, it's in a bit of a mess. Not only do we have several survivors withdrawing from the process, we've also revealed this morning that Annie Hudson, one of the potential chairs, has also quit from the process following significant media coverage, with survivors being told this morning when they were expecting to interview her, that former senior social worker, no longer in the running. David Greenwood last week, a solicitor who works closely with child abuse victims, he said that the inquiry was in a legal mess because, in part, they hadn't launched those local inquiries. There hadn't been that collection of evidence, and so a statutory inquiry would need to spend a lot of time gathering information. Well, Jess Phillips today, the Safeguarding Minister, said that it would be a time-limited probe, 3 years, but still that runs the risk that it might return after the next election because still we don't have a chair. And Martin, we did break the news earlier today that, as you say, a third survivor had quit the panel. I think she joins us on the line now. Her name is Elizabeth. It's not her real name, but she's based in Rotherham. Elizabeth, can you tell us why you decided to quit the panel today? Thank you so much for coming on GB News.
Because it lacks transparency. I believe it should be a public process. I feel that there's a selective agenda and a selective narrative on how it's going to be conducted. I feel that there's the truth isn't going to come out, and I feel like it's a cover-up of a cover-up.
And when you say a cover-up of a cover-up, Elizabeth, I mean, we've heard a lot of concerns from survivors about the terms of reference, about you guys being asked, do you want a broader remit beyond grooming gangs? That was in an email sent to you. The government say that that's sort of separate, and it's untrue to say that the inquiry is going to be expanded, but that's clearly caused a lot of concern.
Absolutely. It was suggested that we was asked, would we like to see it broadened? My initial thoughts to that was, no, we don't. We've had it, so we don't need another one. We need one that solely concentrates on the grooming gangs and gets to the bottom of one of Britain's darkest secrets. I just feel what we're going to see is a watered-down version that's already been scripted to how it's going to appear.
And also, Elizabeth, we've heard from Fiona Goddard and Eliane Reynolds, other survivors who quit yesterday evening ahead of this statement from Jess Phillips today. She said it was untrue to say that the remit has been expanded or that they could be looking at region-wide inquiries. What's your reaction to what Jess Phillips had to say in the Commons today?
The thing is, it is untrue. We got emails. It was also suggested on a meeting, and the things that we've been experiencing is quite a toxic environment. You know, a lot of pressure being applied to members of the panel by emails saying a gentle reminder about confidentiality and things like that. Fiona is telling the truth. That is what happened.
And Elizabeth, when we talk about how some survivors have said they felt silenced, you've said the same as well this morning, and so have the other two victims who quit this panel. When you say silenced, I mean, talk to us about what you mean by that. What has been the effect of this silencing that you're talking about?
It is actually one of the reasons that I have basically quit and withdrawn from the panel, due to me having a fear that I were going to become complicit in the silence of survivors. You know, things like, oh, nothing goes out of this room, etc., things like that. Also about the media playing a part in, like, basically telling the public what's going off. It felt like we were all under suspicion. It was causing quite a toxic place to be and very, very uncomfortable.
Okay.
And I don't feel that we should have had that pressure applied to us.
Yeah, I mean, Elizabeth, one survivor speaking to us earlier who's still on the panel said it felt even stricter than being on a jury, not even allowed to speak to each other out of the event. Just one more question, Elizabeth, because obviously you've had one person come up to be interviewed to be a chair. That was Jim Gamble. Annie Hudson pulled out, the senior social worker. A lot of people are saying that they would like a judge for this. However, Jess Phillips said today that every system of government failed, every institution failed you guys, you victims, you survivors, saying that the judiciary and judges in the courts, they criminalise victims as well and took their children away. Does that make you want to have a judge less, or do you think that perhaps you should look overseas to find the right sort of judge to lead this inquiry?
Absolutely. We need somebody independent to this country. We need somebody who's not political, that's impartial. And we need somebody who's absolutely legally trained to understand what went off and why.
OK, thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. And Martin, as you can hear there, so much of Elizabeth's decision is based around that sense of having this inquiry looking directly at this issue, and also those concerns that she shared, Martin, about silencing and fears she had about being engaged with the process fully. A lot of survivors have shared that concerns. The Home Office say that this inquiry is still narrowing down the terms of reference. Sources in the department have told the Channel today that they were started with a very wide definition after Baroness Casey's audit in June. But when you see that email that survivors were sent that we revealed earlier today, they were asked, Do you want to look beyond grooming gangs? And it seems for at least 3, but we know many more were concerned by it as well, that was a step too far to ask that question.
You know, Charlie Peter, I'm always absolutely blown away and humbled and very, very moved when I hear survivors like Elizabeth speak there. You know, to be re-traumatised like this again and again and again just seems so unjust. Charlie Peters, thank you very much for getting Elizabeth on the show once again and for bringing us up to speed. Thank you very much, Charlie Peters. Well, my next guest now is Marlon West, whose daughter is also a survivor of the rape gangs. Marlon, welcome to the show. Your beautiful daughter, of course, Scarlett, fell into a grooming gang, age 14. She was raped, I believe, by over 60 men in the most horrific ways imaginable. I don't know how you're still with us, mate. I just think you must be some sort of superhero to have lived through that and kept going. And now your daughter is also a part of this inquiry, and you voiced very strongly yesterday that you do believe that she's being gagged because the questions they're being screened. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is correct. What I would like to say though, Scarlett won't be leaving the inquiry. She's so desperate for change, and we've discussed this today. That she doesn't feel she's got any other opportunity but to stay in the panel.
Yeah, I understand what you mean, because this is it, right? You know, after everything that she's been through, this is her moment to try and go through, relive her own trauma, to try and push for justice, no matter how she may feel that the system or the panel is stacked against her. This is it. She has to fight for truth and justice, not only for her, but for every survivor out there.
Yeah, and that's what she says. She'll always say this. I do not want anyone to go through what I went through and my family. She always says it. And yeah, what other option has she got?
I always ask you this, and I want to ask you again, Marlon, how is she and how are you?
I'm really frustrated at the moment, especially seeing Jess Phillips in Parliament today. I think Jess needs to be removed from any part of the inquiry, and the Home Secretary should take a lead on this. As a parent, really frustrated. The other thing for me is they haven't got any family members within the panel, which again is frustrating, because it's us parents who are dealing with social services and the police when our children are going missing. And having social services basically verbally abuse us and blame us for our children being raped and tortured. So, yeah, I'm really upset at the moment.
Well, thanks for coming on the show once again. And please pass our sincere love and best wishes onto your beautiful daughter during what must be a very, very difficult time for us. Seriously, Marlon, every time you come on, I'm greatly moved by you and your daughter's endeavours. I sincerely am. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
Once again on GB News. Now, I've got a quick response to read out. The Home Office has said this: the abuse of children by grooming gangs is one of the most horrific crimes imaginable, and any suggestion that this inquiry is being watered down is completely wrong. We are committed to delivering a robust, thorough inquiry that will get to the truth and provide the answers that survivors have so long campaigned for. And we are working urgently to appoint the best chair to take forward this work and deliver justice, putting victims and survivors at the heart of the process. And we are grateful to all of those who have shared their insights with us, and we share the concerns around unhelpful speculation while this process is live, which is why we will not be providing a running commentary. OK, let's get back to the studio here. I'm joined by the Labour Party MP Conor Naismith, Labour MP for Crewe and Nantwich. Welcome to the studio, and thanks for coming into the studio to see us today. You've heard there from a survivor, Elizabeth. You heard there from a father of a survivor, Marlon. They're clearly at their wits' end by a process which, let's be frank, the Labour Party, many believe, were kicked. They were dragged into kicking and screaming. You voted against the inquiry time and time again. Now we're here. They're feeling that this just isn't good enough. What say you?
So, I mean, I listened really carefully there to what Elizabeth and what Marlon were saying, and I think you're absolutely right. You can't help but be moved by the horrific experience that they have clearly had. We're talking about, you know, some of the most heinous crimes, the biggest scandal, you know, that's affected this country in recent times, but arguably ever. And it is important that their voices are at the heart of what this inquiry delivers. Now, I think what I heard was understandably a lack of faith in the institutions to deliver on that. That is completely understandable because we know that under successive governments, these people have been failed. And it now is for this government to put those victims' voices at the heart of the inquiry and make sure that they are satisfied with the terms of reference and with the appointment of the chair. That's absolutely crucial. If that isn't the case, then the inquiry simply will not deliver justice.
But they're clearly not satisfied. You know, we're hearing here of people feeling like they're being gagged. They're not allowed to ask questions. They're afraid of media intrusions. They're afraid of their own lives being dragged through the mud again. We've got fathers who are at their wits' end because their daughters who've been... Scarlett was raped by over 60 men from the age of 14. Now, they need closure. They need to be listened to. They don't feel like that at the moment. And there's particular criticism there being levelled by Marlon West towards Jess Phillips.
So, you know, I can't speak to their experience on that panel. Only they can do that. And I think we have to take that at face value. That is their experience. And we should take that very seriously. The government should take that very seriously. Because I just go back to, if the survivors and the families of the survivors are not confident in the work of the inquiry, then the inquiry will not succeed at what we're intending it to do, which is to deliver justice for those people. So the government has to listen to the accounts of Marlon, the accounts of Elizabeth and others who are saying they feel frustrated about what's happened so far.
And can you pledge to us, today, to the survivors and to our viewers, Conor, you'll go back into Parliament and say, look, we really, really have to do better on this. We really, really got to pull our socks up and make sure that these survivors get the justice that they so desperately deserve. Absolutely, absolutely. You know, I will make representations to ministers and others to make sure that we get this right. We have to get this right. You know, it's just too important. You can hear the emotion in the people that we've heard from, and we just can't allow that pain to be prolonged any further. And Conor, I could see that you were very moved during those two interviews as well, as was I. Let's move on to something else that's happening in Parliament today. There's an amendment a bill being tabled to get the government to publish data into the national origin, the country of origin of criminals in Britain. I've got a couple of graphics I think I'd like to show you now, because this does happen in other European nations. It happens in Denmark. It happens in the Netherlands, and it doesn't at present happen here. If we can try and get those graphics up, we can see that there are clear patterns. Hard to see what's going on there. Let me talk you through it. This is Denmark, and you can see on that table there are a huge number of nations that are more likely to commit violent crimes by nation versus the native population. In fact, there are 41 countries more likely, and the majority of those are from the Middle East, from North Africa. We've got another one, I think that is from the Netherlands. The same pattern emerges. We have a graphic as well of data we've had to put together ourselves here at GB News with help from the Centre for Migration Control, and that has shown when you put the data in that Afghans, for example, are 22 times more likely than Brits to commit sexual offences. Here we go in Britain. In fact, there are 79 nations more likely to be sex offenders versus Britain. This is in Parliament today, Conor Naismith. We want transparency, a vote on it. Will you vote for people to see the truth in Britain, or will you vote to conceal it?
So I heard Robert Jenrick talking about this and saying that the British public have been gaslit for many years. And I think the first point to make is, if Robert Jenrick really thinks that, then he needs to get away from the camera crews and get himself in front of the nearest mirror to ask himself why that is, because he was part of a government that was in charge for 14 years. They had the opportunity to do these things. If they think that that's going to make a difference, they had the opportunity to do it, and they didn't.
You'll vote to conceal this information, won't you?
Well, I just wouldn't frame it like that. I won't be voting for the amendment that Robert Jenrick is putting forward, and I'll tell you why.
Because it's Robert Jenrick's?
No.
What about the truth?
No. I'll be voting against it because I think that it's the priority of government should be focusing all of its energy and its time on doing the things that will actually make people feel safer in their communities.
Well, this might.
Like the crime and policing bill, which we introduced.
If the government acknowledge perhaps that people from abroad are more likely to commit crimes in their area, they might feel that you're actually listening to them.
But I think it's important to acknowledge the police and the law enforcement agencies have this information, and it's important that we trust them to do their jobs in acting on that information, right? So it's not that that information doesn't exist. It exists, the police can use it, and they do. What this is asking the government to do is to spend time and energy publishing that information, when I think we should be spending all of the civil servants and the Secretary of State, etc's energy on doing the things that will actually make people safer, like the crime and policing bill, which the government introduced. It contained measures to tackle shoplifting, to ban dangerous knives, to make mandatory reporting of child sexual offences. The Tories and Reform voted against that bill. So that's where our priorities are, and it's clear that the opposition's priorities are on grandstanding and things that won't make any difference.
OK, thank you very much for joining us today in the studio and being so forthright. Connor Naismith MP, of course, Labour for Crewe and Nantwich. Thanks for coming into the studio today for your opinions. Still to come soon now, 6 p.m. The number of young people not in education, employment or training is on track to hit the 1 million mark for the first time ever. What on earth's going on? That's next with me, Martin Daubney.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m. only on GB News.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel. At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it?
No,
Because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power?
Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber.
Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics.
We'll see where this ruling takes us.
These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Good evening. The top stories. US President Donald Trump has issued a warning to Hamas on his Truth Social account. He says if Hamas don't do the right thing, their end will be fast, furious and brutal. Donald Trump's 20-point ceasefire plan calls for Hamas to disarm and for steps towards a Palestinian state, demands both sides have yet to fully accept. Annie Hudson, once tipped to lead the National Grooming Gangs inquiry, has quit before interviews even took place, deepening the crisis around the probe. Her exit follows the resignation of 3 abuse survivors from the victims' panel, who say trust in the process has collapsed. The ghostwriter of Virginia Giuffre's new memoir says Prince Andrew should finally speak to US authorities about Jeffrey Epstein's abuse. He's being urged to tell police everything he knows. Andrew denies any wrongdoing. Boris Johnson is giving evidence to the COVID inquiry about the effect of the pandemic on young people. He says school closures were a nightmare idea, but he was left with no choice. Those are the latest headlines. For now, more from me at 6 o'clock.
For all the latest from GB News whilst you're on the go, get the GB News app. Scan the QR code now to download or visit gbnews.com/app.
Welcome back. It is 5:32 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, the number of young people not in education, employment or training was on track to hit the 1 million mark for the first time in more than a decade. Now, disability issues and ill health are meant to be part of this sharp increase in needs, as researchers behind the reports believe that young people are becoming increasingly detached from the workplace. So what on earth is going on? Are the youngsters snowflakes? Are they work shy? There's something else altogether going on. Well, to discuss this, I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by the political commentator Jack Anderton. Jack, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I've got to say, as somebody with a 16-year-old kid, as somebody who graduated a long time ago, I think this is deeply concerning, and I don't think it's fair to say that young people are work shy or snowflakes or they're signing off on the sick to avoid reality. Is it just the fact that life is so expensive now and it's so hard to get on? Immigration, housing, the cost of living. A lot of people are looking down the barrel of this reality thinking, I can't cope.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. But there are 3 points that I would make. The first is that young people are being totally screwed over by what is a failed university system that has completely failed to bring them any prosperity, any wealth or any success. The second point is thanks to both Labour and the Conservatives, who have imported millions of foreign workers and millions of international students as well. Jobs and opportunities for young people are even more restricted. And the third, but actually I think is a wider cultural issue, which is that for a certain sector of the population, there is an anti-youth mindset. For example, I'm sure I'll get comments after this show and when I write my pieces for the Daily Mail as well. They criticise my age rather than the content of my actual writing or what I've said. And I think that's an important point to raise as well, which actually, if we want things to change for young people, we do actually have to listen to younger people.
I speak to so many parents whose children now are living with them, sometimes into their 30s. And these people aren't parasites. They want to go out into the world and to get on a huge, huge barrier. And we did an item earlier about social housing. 73% of social housing in boroughs of London are taken by people coming from overseas, forcing the rents through the roof. To participate in society in places like London is so bloody expensive.
So that's right. So in London, it's about 50% of social housing occupants are foreign-born. And across the country, it's about 20%. So if you're a young graduate and say, for example, you've graduated from Durham or Oxford or Cambridge or whatever university it is, and you need to move to London for your job, the cost of rent is enormous. So many people simply can't afford to do it. So they either live at home or they just simply don't move to London where the actual real job opportunities are. So the issue is, it's a question of fairness, actually, and generational fairness. And the point is that young people who are renting on the private market are paying potentially thousands of pounds a month in rent, whilst immigrants in social housing are paying a couple £100. So it is that question of unfairness. And if you're a young person in Britain today and you look at that situation, you might think, well, what actually is the point in going to work and getting a job?
Tony Blair sold the illusion of education. The fact of the matter is now, Jack Anderton, there's an oversupply of people, let's be honest, with Mickey Mouse degrees, and at the same time, the £50,000 in debt, and they're finding it hard to get out of it. Jack, we have that bit there. Donald Trump once again has hoped interview. He's talking in Washington. Let's go to Donald Trump.
I saw an ad last night from Canada. If I was Canada, I'd take that same ad also. But they're actually on television taking ads. But I do believe that everybody's too smart for that. We have a very, very big and important case coming up. We should win the case based on the legal merit. We should also win the case based on all of the things I just said. But we're a wealthy country again. Last week, as you know, they found $31 billion. They came to see me, sir. We found $31 billion. They said, we don't know why. I said, was this a good find or a bad find? It was a good find. It was a plus 31. We're used to finding negative 31s, right, for the last 30 years. I said, check the tariff shelf. Well, those tariffs haven't kicked in. Yes, they did. They kicked in 2 months ago. Check it. He comes back 2 hours later. Sir, you were right. We have an additional $31 billion, billion, not million, Lindsay, billion, that we just found from tariffs. They kicked in earlier than we thought. You were right. We're a wealthy nation again, and we're a nation that can be secure. We're a nation that can start paying down our debt. And with tariffs, we're the wealthiest nation ever in the history of the world. Without them, we've got to slog. We've got to slog. But remember this, other nations, including China, Japan, European nations, they used tariffs against us for many years. That's why we owe $37 trillion. That's why. But they used tariffs very successfully against us, and we had presidents that never fought it. But now you have a president that does fight it. So I just want to welcome you to
Donald Trump there speaking in Washington. Just a brief dip into what President Donald Trump is saying. I'd like to continue our previous conversation now, if I could. I'm still joined in the studio by Jack Anderton. Jack, how do we solve this problem? How do we make young people re-engage again? And do we need to mention that word, immigration?
Well, I think it is two central issues. It's housing and immigration. So last year, about 1 million people came into this country, and we only built 220,000 homes. It's simple supply and demand. And that's why the cost of housing is so enormous. And what you can see across Europe and across America, actually, is that political parties that want to attract those younger voters are offering policies that directly impact on those two issues, housing and immigration. So you saw that with Trump, you've seen it in France, and you've seen it in Italy. So the next political party that wants to win over young people in Britain has to tackle those two issues.
So we could see a swing to the political right in Britain, as we have seen across Europe and America. Jack Anderton, always a pleasure. Sincerely, thanks for coming in today to see us here in the studio. I'll play more to come throughout the rest of the show, but for now, if you're travelling home from work or from school, here's your traffic and your travel update, and don't forget to stick with us here on GB News.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. Significant delays on the M6 northbound in Cheshire between junctions 19 and 20 are due to congestion with 15-minute delays. In Staffordshire, the M6 southbound near junctions 15 and 14 has one lane closed after a collision, with normal traffic expected between 7 and 7:15 this evening. Broken down vehicle issues on the A4, 14 westbound between junctions with the A405 and the M1 cause 30-minute delays. On the M25 anti-clockwise between junctions 11 and 10 in Surrey, one lane is closed from a collision, causing disruption. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Hello again, I'm here with your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Through the rest of today, yes, there will be some showery rain still, but a lot of this is actually going to ease as we head through the evening and overnight. I do actually want to highlight an area of low pressure currently out in the Atlantic. That's heading our way. It's going to bring some very wet and windy weather to southern parts later tomorrow and into Thursday. But before all that, yes, still some showery bursts through the rest of today, but into the evening and overnight, they're easing. Lots of places turning largely dry. Lots of of clear skies around, and with those clear skies then temperatures are going to drop just a little bit lower than they have done through some recent nights. So a bit of a fresh start for some of us. Rural spots getting close to freezing, and we could see some pockets of mist and fog first thing as well. It is then going to be a generally bright, albeit fresh start to the day for many of us tomorrow. Across some southern parts of England, largely dry, just 1 or 2 showers perhaps towards coastal parts of Cornwall, and similar some coastal showers of parts of Wales. Across Northern Ireland, it's mostly dry towards the east, a few showers starting to push in from the west, and also a bit of a west-east split across much of Scotland too. Cloudy, a bit wetter towards the west, some stronger winds here. Meanwhile, in the east and down the eastern side of northern England too, lots of fine bright weather to start the day once any mist and fog patches burn away. Through the day itself, still a few showery bursts across northern western parts, but otherwise most places having a lot of fine weather, probably the driest day of the week for many places, albeit later on we are going to see cloud building from the southwest with that rain arriving as well. With a bit more sunshine and generally light winds for many, it won't feel too bad. Relatively warm with temperatures peaking in the mid-teens, but then things turn cloudy, wet and windy across southern parts as that system that I highlighted at the start pushes its way in. Now we are going to see more very wet and windy weather to come, particularly across southern and eastern parts as we go through Thursday, and then a showery day on Friday before things turn drier but colder by Saturday.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
The fact has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up? About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power?
Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber.
Get behind the headlines with Chopper's political podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics.
We'll see where this ruling takes us.
These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's political podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
Welcome back. It's 5:42. You with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, a convicted killer who strangled his girlfriend and then drove her body around in her car. He stands to pocket thousands of pounds in state benefits from behind bars. Well, go-goer Lois Tape, he avoided prison after being convicted of manslaughter rather than murder due to, of course, his mental health, and was therefore sent to a secure psychiatric unit and not to prison, and therefore he can trouser thousands of pounds in benefits while inside jail. Well, joining me to discuss this is the former Scotland Yard Detective Superintendent, Shabnam Chowdhury. Shabnam, welcome to the show. This is one of those loopholes that comes out from time to time. It came out most recently and painfully, of course, the triple killing by Valdo Calacane of three of my friends' families in Nottinghamshire. And here we go again. The loophole is because he's not going to prison. Prisoners don't get benefits, but because he was convicted of manslaughter, because of his mental health, he goes to secure hospital instead. He gets benefits. Many people think this is a cruel loophole. Do you agree?
Oh, yeah, 100%, Martin. I think it's absolutely disgraceful, to be honest with you, just because of the fact that there's a loophole which is for those that are in secure mental health units, some that are detained indefinitely, as is this particular individual. But there's always a possibility that at some point they may be released back into the public domain. And some of those do get sent to prison at some point, but they still have the opportunity to be able to claim those, I think it's universal credits, as I understand it, for around about £400 a month. If you add that up to something like 20 years, it's something like £96,000.
Yeah.
Even if somebody came out in a much shorter space of time and they've got £8,000 to £10,000, what a great start in life that is for them when you've got the families who are the victims for the rest of their lives. They suffer that kind of trauma. This vile individual also has a child who will never benefit from any of the funds that he is eligible to claim for. And the other thing I would add, that when you are, and I've got experience of this, when there are people that are in those secure units, they have all the right individuals, whether they're lawyers or experts in their fields, that will try and exploit every possible loophole to give them the best benefits possible, whether that's inside or whether it includes financial gain for themselves.
No, Shabnam Chowdhury, you've very eloquently nailed the situation here. And, the friends of mine from the Vado Kalakain case, Emma Webber, who lost her son, Dr. Sanjoy Kumar, who lost his daughter, Ian Coase, they're re-traumatised by the fact that Vado Kalakain is in a secure unit, banking money, and at some point in the future he could get out. And you're right, he could get £100,000, and it gets worse because that money accrues interest in a bank. It's wrong, and it needs to stop.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I understand it, the Labour government have been lobbying to try and get this loophole closed. But I think we're talking about a year down the line now, because this did come up about a year ago. So I think there needs to be some fast action in respect of trying to get this loophole closed as soon as possible. Think about the money that other people can actually use from this, whether it be for other people's benefits that are vulnerable, or that are the victims of violence and domestic abuse, or killed at the hands of these individuals that are not even classed as prisoners but are classed as patients.
Yeah. Shabnam Chowdhury, we have to leave it there. Thank you very much. You really put that beautifully. Thanks for coming on the show today. Shabnam Chowdhury, thank you very much for your company. Over to some holiday sun, and here is the forecast for some of the top European destinations.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Half-term has already started for some of us, but I'm afraid there's not much holiday sun to go around. Parts of Greece will see heavy showers and thunderstorms. Also, many areas of northern Europe will continue to see unsettled weather. Heavy showers, also some strong gusty winds, particularly around northern coasts of Spain and around coasts of France. Italy too will see some heavy showers, and Greece could see some quite intense thunderstorms with hail and gusty winds. These are set to continue as we head later into the week, with hopefully the return of some sunshine over the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m.
Only on GB News.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
It was so unexpected. What we needed was somebody to sit with us and talk about how we were going to feel. Yes, everyone experiences grief differently. Everyone feels very differently after they've lost their child. But there are some real common things that run through it. And one of them is guilt. Could I have prevented this happening to my child? I'm here to protect them and I didn't protect him. And that was some of the things that Paul did say to me that weekend, was he felt he'd failed us. He felt he'd let George down. He'd failed me as his wife. The most awful things to say. And of course, I reassured him. But what we needed was somebody who, had some experience of working with families who'd experienced such loss. Someone to sit with us. And that's what Tawish does. That's the one thing that I was so passionate about, was making sure that we work with hospitals, the police, because there's obviously a heavy police influence as well. Somebody who will get that referral. The family then can sit with our workers and just talk.
And Rhiann, Tawish is now part of Prince William's new National Suicide Prevention Network, which is launched around 20 organisations, I believe, around the country. Can you just explain how the charity and yourself got involved and how that led to Prince William literally sitting in your kitchen and you having a chat with him?
I just worked with the Royal Foundation, so I'm honestly overwhelmed that they want us to be part of this very important network. So it's bringing the 4 nations together, which again is a unique piece of work where people can talk, find out why is this happening to our loved ones? What can we do to support these people? Let's bring people together. Let's talk about it. And more importantly, let's talk about suicide.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. More terrible news now for Prince Andrew. Cameron Walker, our royal correspondent, joins us now. Cameron Walker, the public have spoken. They've had enough of him.
Well, they really have, Martin. 80% of the British public, according to the latest YouGov poll, wants Prince Andrew's titles officially stripped from him via an Act of Parliament, i.e. formally removing the Duke of York title. So on Friday, the Prince announced that he was no longer going to be using the Duke of York title. That's very different from it being removed from him altogether. And the last time that happened was 1917, an incredibly long time ago. The palace is saying, well, it's up to the government and we don't want to waste parliamentary time. And the government's saying it's actually up to the palace and we take the lead from them. So we're not quite sure who's going to be taking responsibility for this, even if it does happen. But we're now seeing a clamour of MPs from different political parties wanting to actually enact some kind of legislation and actually debate whether or not Prince Andrew's titles should be removed. And it is after a string of scandals which have continued to dominate the news headlines over the last few days. Of course, it's the official publication of Virginia Giuffre's memoir today. That's the lady who took her own life in April, but alleged that Prince Andrew had sex with her on 3 separate occasions when she was underage. They are claims that Prince Andrew continues to deny, but we also now have this issue with Royal Lodge, the 30-room mansion that Prince Andrew still lives in Windsor Castle, and it appears he's paying what's been described in the lease agreement that's been leaked as peppercorn rent, i.e. he pays nothing to live there. But it is slightly more complicated than that. When he moved in 2003, he paid £1 million to kind of sort the lease agreement out because it's a private tenancy agreement with the Crown Estate. Then he paid around £7.5 million to renovate the property because it was kind of falling down. It was a bit old back in the day. But the lease agreement runs until 2078, so he can legally live there all of that time. But the money we thought he was paying each year was just over £200,000 a year. But that turns out that is not the case. He is paying literally £1 a year, if not zero. And this is the Crown Estate property. Essentially, it's a public building that he is not paying any money towards the Treasury and the public purse. So let's see how that plays out.
There we go. The pointless prince might now become the pauper of a prince. People want him gone. Thank you very much, Cameron Walker. Well, we've got our own TV royalty coming next. It's Michelle Dewberry. I'm off for a few days. I'll see you next Monday. Until then, I'll be leaving the very, very safe hands, the beautiful hands of Michelle Dewberry. Dubes and Co. What's on your menu?
Oh, Martin, I thought you was going to say, speaking of paupers, here's Michelle Dewberry. I thought that was a rallying cry to try and get me a pay rise. No such luck. Anyway, loads that we need to discuss on my show tonight. I want to talk to you about the real-world impact of crime. A special guest joins me to do just that. Also, speaking of criminals, many of them set to be released from prison early. What a mess. Also, speaking of messes, the absolute state of the public purse. But it's all right. A wealth tax is apparently the answer. Is it? I'll see you in a minute.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello again, I'm here with your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Through the rest of today, yes, there will be some showery rain still, but a lot of this is actually going to ease as we head through the evening and overnight. I do actually want to highlight an area of low pressure currently out in the Atlantic. That's heading our way. It's going to bring some very wet and windy weather to southern parts later tomorrow and into Thursday. But before all that, yes, still some showery bursts through the rest of today, but into the evening and overnight, they're easing. Lots of places turning largely dry. Lots of of clear skies around, and with those clear skies then temperatures are going to drop just a little bit lower than they have done through some recent nights. So a bit of a fresh start for some of us. Rural spots getting close to freezing, and we could see some pockets of mist and fog first thing as well. It is then going to be a generally bright, albeit fresh start to the day for many of us tomorrow. Across some southern parts of England, largely dry, just 1 or 2 showers perhaps towards coastal parts of Cornwall, and similar some coastal showers of parts of Wales. Across Northern Ireland, it's mostly dry towards the east, a few showers starting to push in from the west, and also a bit of a west-east split across much of Scotland too. Cloudy, a bit wetter towards the west, some stronger winds here. Meanwhile, in the east and down the eastern side of northern England too, lots of fine bright weather to start the day once any mist and fog patches burn away. Through the day itself, still a few showery bursts across northern western parts, but otherwise most places having a lot of fine weather, probably the driest day of the week for many places, albeit later on we are going to see cloud building from the southwest with that rain arriving as well. With a bit more sunshine and generally light winds for many, it won't feel too bad. Relatively warm with temperatures peaking in the mid-teens, but then things turn cloudy, wet and windy across southern parts as that system that I highlighted at the start pushes its way in. Now we are going to see more very wet and windy weather to come, particularly across southern and eastern parts as we go through Thursday, and then a showery day on Friday before things turn drier but colder by Saturday.
Today, clouds overhead. Total zen within. Boxed Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good evening. This is the latest AI travel news from GBNews.com. The A828 at Connell Bridge faces restrictions. Expect delays. Traffic is heavy on the A55 eastbound between junction 32A at Pentre Hulkin and the A494 at Queensferry. Congestion affects the M6 northbound in Cheshire, delaying motorists by half an hour. The A38 northbound in Staffordshire struggles with stoppages. The A34 northbound in Hampshire has a lane closure due to a broken down vehicle. And on the trains, Gatwick Express services are halted, while East Midlands Railway faces disruption between Cleethorpes and Lincoln and Ely and Norwich. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
There's 2 weeks remaining in our latest, greatest giveaway. You could be in the driving seat of this Benamar Primera motorhome. This luxurious home from home comes with all the mod cons, plus you can use it with your current driving licence. We'll also boost your bank account with a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like. It only takes one entry to become a winner. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB16 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 31st of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off-limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Jubes & Co. Coming on tonight, ladies and gents, the public purse is in a catastrophic mess, and it's time that we talked about it. But it's all right, because according to people like the Green Party, the answer is simple. It's a wealth tax. Your thoughts? And the Maccabi Tel Aviv v Aston Villa saga, we followed this closely, haven't we? It's finally reached a conclusion. They basically refused the ticket allocation. Tell me, was that the right end to the story or not? And we talk about crime often on this programme, but tonight I want to bring you the real-world impact of it, and I'll be joined by a special guest to do just that. And speaking of criminals, more of them look likely to be released from prison early because of the absolute state of our justice system. Let's take a look. All of that and lots more keeping me company. My panel tonight, the Conservative peer and former MEP Baroness Jacqueline Foster and Green Party councillor and political commentator Martin Abrams. But before we get stuck in, here's your 6 o'clock news headline.
Michelle, thank you and good evening. The top stories. Donald Trump says if Hamas don't do the right thing, their end will be fast, furious and brutal. The US president issued that warning on his Truth Social account. His 20-point ceasefire plan calls for Hamas to disarm and for steps towards a Palestinian state, demands both sides have yet